The women gather around, their voices filled with warmth as they encourage the hesitant young woman to embrace the newest member of the family. They urge her to take the child into her arms, creating a scene of domestic harmony and welcoming. She hesitates, her hands trembling slightly as she voices her fears of accidentally causing him harm. Diva gently guides her, offering reassurance and demonstrating the proper way to cradle the infant's head, soothing her anxieties with a mother's steady confidence. Finally, she pulls the small, warm bundle against her chest. The infant rests peacefully in her embrace, his tiny features relaxed as he experiences the gentle touch of his new caretaker for the first time. Long before this new life began, he stood upon a very different stage. In a world of steel and glass, he was hailed as a master of his craft, a man whose stories had captured the hearts of millions and earned him the highest honors his profession could bestow. He possessed a singular, driving ambition that burned behind his eyes. Every stroke of his pen was a step toward a goal that few could even imagine, fueled by a relentless desire to prove his worth to the world. His entire existence was defined by a solitary, unwavering purpose: to reach the absolute summit of his field and look down upon all others from the peak of success. The accolades came in rapid succession, beginning with a sensational debut at the age of 18. Soon, his work was selling by the millions, transcending the printed page to become a cinematic phenomenon that cemented his legacy. Yet, this ascent came at a staggering cost. He became a demanding taskmaster, viewing those around him not as companions, but as mere instruments to facilitate his climb. Friends drifted away, replaced by resentment, and even the woman he loved eventually walked away, unable to compete with his obsession. Standing amidst the hollow grandeur of his achievements, he remained unrepentant. Though he walked a lonely path, he convinced himself that his isolation was the necessary price of greatness, a burden he was willing to bear as long as he remained at the top. He finally admitted it to himself. He had been wrong. The thought had never even crossed his mind before, but the reality was now impossible to ignore. This realization had struck him the moment the doctor delivered the diagnosis. The words "true polycythemia" echoed in the sterile room, a rare disease where red blood cells multiply uncontrollably. When he pressed for a simpler explanation, the doctor didn't mince words. It was blood cancer. The news sent him collapsing to the floor, the weight of his mortality suddenly crushing. Even as he sped through the city in his luxury car, the tears wouldn't stop. He tried to console himself, thinking of the medical advancements and the 10-year survival rates, but the bitterness remained. He was only 29 years old, at the peak of his career, and yet his time was already running out. The clinical reality set in further when the nurse gently informed him that the next detailed examination would require a family member to be present. It was a standard procedure, a necessary step for the difficult road ahead. Sitting alone in the hospital corridor, the truth he had desperately tried to deny finally surfaced. He was completely and utterly alone. He looked back at the life he had built, seeing only a void where connections should have been. There was no girlfriend to hold his hand, no friends to accompany him to these grim appointments, and a mother whose only interest in him was financial. His entire existence had been a lie, a series of hollow achievements that meant nothing in the face of death. He had been so captivated by his superficial success that he hadn't noticed his life becoming empty. The fame and the wealth were just shadows, leaving him isolated in his hour of greatest need. While he sat in his car, lost in despair, his phone began to vibrate. Seeing his mother's name on the screen, he felt a surge of irritation. He answered, wondering what she could possibly want now, only to be met with her usual casual greeting. With a trembling voice, he confessed the truth, telling her about the cancer and the few years he had left. He begged for her help, for some shred of maternal comfort. But the sounds on the other end were not of concern. They were the clatter of a pachinko parlor. She ignored his diagnosis entirely, instead asking if he could send her 100,000 yen for her rent. The desperation in his eyes grew as he pleaded with her, explaining how scared he was and how much he needed her to come to the hospital for the procedure. His words fell on deaf ears. She didn't ask about his health or his fear. She only repeated her demand for the money, leaving him shattered by the coldness of the only family he had left. He reflects on his childhood, walking beside the woman who should have loved him, yet even then, her mind was consumed by greed rather than her only son. His hand trembles violently against the cold plastic of the phone as her voice crackles through the line, demanding his attention while he grapples with his terminal diagnosis. The dam finally breaks, and he roars into the receiver, his voice cracking with years of suppressed resentment as he tells her to rot alongside her gambling machines, unable to bear the weight of his miserable existence any longer. Driven by a sudden, desperate impulse, he throws himself into the path of a speeding vehicle, his arms outstretched to shove a terrified mother and her child towards safety. Silence descends over the city skyline as the moon hangs indifferent in the night sky, the echoes of the screeching tires fading into the urban hum. In his final moments, a flood of memories washes over him. Simple joys of a magazine bought and a mother's embrace, leading to the bitter realization that all he ever truly craved was a sense of peace that eluded him his entire life. His eyes widen in a state of pure shock, the reality of his sacrifice beginning to settle in as the world around him starts to blur. A single, confused thought echoes through the fading consciousness of the dying man. He finds himself standing in an oppressive, pitch-black void, his mind racing with questions about his location and the fate of the strangers he risked everything to protect. He wonders if he collided with a utility pole in the chaos. Before he can make sense of the darkness, a glowing interface manifests before him, coldly announcing that his journey in that world has reached its definitive conclusion. He stares at the message in disbelief, the reality of his demise finally sinking in. The words confirming his life has ended hang in the void, a cold finality to his previous existence. Before he can fully process the end, a new prompt flickers into existence, instructing him to select a mother for his next life. He stammers in confusion, unable to comprehend the bizarre request to choose his own parent for a reincarnation he barely understands. Suddenly, 5 glowing portraits materialize in the darkness, each depicting a woman of remarkable beauty and status. He stands small before the towering displays, dwarfed by the weight of the decision laid out before him. The concept of a new beginning starts to take hold as he reads the titles accompanying the women: royalty, millionaires, and even an immortal. He realizes that this choice will dictate the very foundation of his new existence, offering him paths he never could have imagined. He weighs the possibilities, noting that these candidates offer lives of guaranteed wealth, fame, and power. It seems like a dream scenario, a chance to start at the very top of a new world's social hierarchy with every advantage provided from birth. However, the thought of returning to a life of high expectations and public scrutiny triggers a visceral reaction, and he cries out in frustration. He had enough of that hollow success in his previous life, where fame and wealth only brought him a crushing sense of loneliness and misery. His gaze shifts toward a woman with a kind, unassuming expression, whose presence promises the one thing he truly craves: a peaceful place to relax. He yearns for a normal life, far away from the pressures of status and the hell of constant achievement. This woman is labeled simply as a commoner, the daughter of a magic shop owner. The simplicity of her background and the lack of grand titles are exactly what he is looking for in his next journey. Though her profile is a mystery to him, her gentle smile feels like the perfect answer to his silent plea for tranquility. He makes his choice, feeling a strange, comforting pull toward the name Diva Roland. She greets him with a radiant, welcoming smile that seems to illuminate the void. His new life begins not with a roar of triumph, but with the warmth of a mother's embrace as she welcomes him by name. She is officially selected, the choice finalized as the path to a new life begins with the selection of a mother. The threads of fate weave together in mysterious ways, connecting souls through encounters that seem almost predestined, as a man and woman find their lives entwined in the heart of a bustling town. In the warmth of a quiet room, the new mother cradles her child for the first time, her husband leaning in with a look of pure adoration for the life they have created together. Looking up at them with wide, innocent eyes, the infant is met with a profound sense of gratitude, a silent blessing for his arrival into this world. 7 years pass in the blink of an eye, and the quiet beginnings have blossomed into the bustling energy of a thriving city where people go about their daily lives. Within the heart of Stormheim, the royal capital, the Rainford Magic Shop stands as a pillar of the community, where the father skillfully manages the trade of healing scrolls, concluding a sale of 2 gold coins with a satisfied customer. Beside him, the young boy helps his mother with the daily chores, earning a cheerful word of thanks for his diligent assistance in the shop. Now 7 years old, Akira Rainford has fully embraced his new identity, his face bright with the joy of a childhood far removed from the burdens of his past life. As the rush of customers subsides, his mother gently dismisses him, explaining that the busy hours have ended and he is free to go out and play. He receives a reassuring smile as she promises to handle the remaining business herself, insisting that he leave the store to his mother so he can simply enjoy being a child. She looks down at her son with a mixture of amusement and warmth as he insists on staying by her side. The young boy explains that his father tasked him with her protection until his return from the guild, a duty he takes with utmost seriousness. Overcome by his earnest devotion, she pulls him into a crushing, affectionate embrace, squealing about how incredibly cute he is. He can barely breathe as she promises to shower him with all the love she possesses, moved by his simple declaration of affection. Amidst this overwhelming warmth, a quiet realization settles within him. He still carries the heavy burden of memories from his previous existence, a life far removed from this gentle domesticity. He recalls the man he once was, Akira Kamishiro, standing alone in a cold, distant world. That version of himself had sacrificed everything at the altar of professional success, only to be left with a vivid, aching loneliness that eventually destroyed him. The front door swings open, and the heavy boots of the family patriarch announce his return. Carl Rainford enters with a boisterous laugh, immediately greeted by his son's enthusiastic welcome. The seasoned adventurer asks with a grin if the boy has fulfilled his duty of protecting his mother. Looking at the radiant smiles of his parents, the boy feels a profound sense of peace. In this life, he isn't pressured to be a grand success or feared for being mediocre. He is simply a son in a family that loves him unconditionally. As they stand together in a tight-knit circle of warmth, he finally understands what his soul had been searching for. This isn't just a house. It is a sanctuary, a place where he truly belongs. A fierce determination takes root in his heart. These bonds, this simple joy of belonging, are the only treasures he is truly afraid of losing. The celebratory mood continues as the father presents a surprise, a fresh cake he brought home. The boy's eyes light up with excitement, while his mother looks on with a surprised, happy expression at the thoughtful gesture. However, the domestic harmony hits a playful snag when the father tries to hand over the treats immediately. She steps in with a firm but gentle hand, reminding them both that snacks before a proper meal are strictly forbidden. She had been the very embodiment of the comfort he now cherished, yet that peace was abruptly pierced by a sound from the hallway. He stiffened, a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek as a familiar voice reached his ears. It was a stark reminder that his sanctuary wasn't yet perfect. A single, daunting obstacle still stood in the way of his absolute happiness within this home. Arya stands with an air of absolute authority, her gaze sharp and unyielding. As the household's maid and Akira's tutor, she embodies a discipline that leaves no room for error or laziness. She confronts the young boy about his decision to skip sword practice, dismissing his excuses with cold efficiency. Despite his desperate pleas for even a single snack, she remains firm, declaring that discipline must come before indulgence. The maid pushes him through a series of grueling physical drills, ignoring his cries of exhaustion. To her, his age and perceived lack of talent are no excuse for a lack of effort, and she demands he parry her strikes without relying on raw power. He struggles to keep up, realizing that while she is a perfect maid in every technical sense, she treats him with a hostility that feels personal. To add insult to injury, she begins to eat the very cake his father had bought for him, claiming it as her own reward for his failures. The young boy begins to formulate a theory about the source of her resentment, suspecting that she harbors a secret affection for his father, Carl. In his mind, she sees him not as a student, but as an annoying obstacle, the living proof of the love between his parents. He lets his imagination run wild, plotting a way to expose what he believes is her true, manipulative nature. He envisions a scenario where her composure is completely shattered, leading to her being cast out of the house once and for all. His internal scheming is cut short when he notices her staring back at him with a look of intense suspicion. It is as if she can sense the wicked thoughts swirling behind his nervous, sweating brow. She ignores his obvious discomfort and abruptly announces the start of his next trial, magic lessons. He is left sprawled on the floor, gasping for air as the transition from physical to mental labor begins without a moment's rest. She sets a daunting task before him, handing over a stack of blank scrolls and demanding he transcribe 5 beginner-level healing chants by the following morning. If he fails to meet this deadline, she warns him that there will be no snacks for him tomorrow either. He stares at the scrolls in disbelief, knowing that even a single one takes hours of painstaking work to imbue with magic. Arya watches him with a cold, triumphant smile, fully aware that she has set a goal that is nearly impossible for a 7-year-old to achieve. He had a sudden epiphany while staring at the daunting task before him. If he couldn't master the complex calligraphy of magic chants, perhaps he could bypass the system entirely. With a spark of inspiration, he realized that a simple drawing might produce the same magical effect as the tedious script. This was his secret advantage, a shortcut that could change everything. The result was instantaneous. A healing magic scroll lay completed before him, not through writing, but through art. He marveled at the efficiency, realizing he could produce 5 scrolls in a mere 10 minutes. This discovery opened up a world of possibilities, leading him to wonder just how far this unconventional talent could take him. To test the limits of this new ability, he sketched a simple slime onto a blank scroll, and a living creature materialized from the paper. The sudden appearance of the monster sent his mother and tutor into a panic, their screams echoing through the room as the impossible became reality. This was no mere trick. He had discovered the power to bring life to his drawings, a feat that defied the established laws of magic. He reflected on the sheer scale of this gift, a talent that had once belonged to a man who influenced millions, now reborn in the hands of a child who still didn't fully understand the price of such power. However, his tutor was far from impressed, her face contorted with a mix of disbelief and growing resentment. She refused to accept that such a talent could exist without some form of deception, convinced that he was hiding a dangerous potential that would inevitably shatter the peaceful, ordinary life he claimed to want. By the following morning, the tension had only escalated as he presented the completed stack of scrolls to a deeply suspicious Arya. She scrutinized the work, noting that the chanting was far too perfect for a beginner and accusing him of simply overwriting pre-existing scrolls with a pen to hide his lack of effort. She loomed over him, her shadow casting a dark pall as she demanded he replicate the feat right then and there. He stammered, his heart racing as he tried to maintain the lie that his success was merely the result of waking up early and working exceptionally hard. But her piercing gaze saw right through his flimsy excuses. The accusation was laid bare. She believed he had spent the night preparing fakes to deceive her, as completing so many scrolls in such a short time was fundamentally impossible. While his parents watched in silent concern, she doubled down on her harsh assessment, blaming his perceived dishonesty on a fundamental lack of ability. Her voice rose in a sharp demand for the truth, declaring that she would never forgive him for the lie he was supposedly telling. The pressure triggered a painful memory for him, a voice from his past life echoing her sentiment, telling him he simply needed to work harder, which only fueled the rising tide of frustration and hurt within him. Finally, he reached his breaking point, shouting back at her with tears of frustration in his eyes as he questioned why he wasn't allowed to use the gifts he had. Feeling cornered and misunderstood, he turned and bolted from the room, his parting words a bitter rejection of her strict tutelage, leaving his stunned family and a frozen Arya in his wake. He stands by the tranquil lake, the cool air helping to soothe the heat of his earlier anger. Though the water is peaceful, his mind is a whirlwind of regret as he struggles to find the right words for an apology. He knows he overreacted, but the thought of facing her again fills him with a nervous dread. Deciding that he must make amends, he turns back toward the forest, only to find the clearing where he left her empty. A cold realization washes over him as he searches the brush. He had spoken harshly, and now she is nowhere to be found. The silence of the woods feels heavy with the weight of his unspoken apology. Suddenly, the peace is shattered by a violent tremor as a massive, scaled beast lunges from the shadows. Before he can even process the threat, the creature has pinned her to the ground, its sheer size dwarfing her small frame. He can only watch in paralyzed horror as the suddenness of the ambush leaves him breathless. He screams her name, his voice cracking with desperation as he sees her struggling beneath the monster's weight. The creature's claws are dangerously close, and the sight of her in such peril sends a jolt of pure terror through his heart. The beast, a terrifying forest rogue known as a basilisk dragon, looms over its prey with cold, predatory eyes. Its breath is a low, guttural hiss, and its massive head is a mask of primal hunger as it prepares to strike. It roars, a sound that shakes the very trees, while she desperately pleads for him to flee. Despite her own dire situation, her only concern is his safety, her voice strained as she commands him to run and save himself from the dragon's wrath. He stands frozen, the horrifying truth dawning on him. She had been searching for him during the forest's dangerous mating season, and now she is acting as bait to give him a chance to escape. The guilt of his earlier words clashes with the selfless sacrifice he is witnessing, leaving him reeling with confusion and pain. She remains steadfast even in the face of death, declaring that protecting him is her natural duty as his guardian and family. Her resolve is unshakable as she shouts for him to leave, her eyes filled with a fierce, protective love that transcends her usual stern demeanor. The boy clenches his fist, the physical pain of his grip grounding him as memories of his past life's failures and the disappointed faces of his former parents flash through his mind. He realizes that she is nothing like the demanding figures from his previous existence who only sought to control him. Her strictness was never about malice, but about genuine care. Looking at her now, he finally understands the depth of her devotion. She has always been there, a constant and protective presence in his new life, and the realization that she truly views him as family changes everything. Arya screams for him to flee, her voice cracking with desperation as the monstrous threat looms over them both. Instead of retreating, he stands his ground, his gaze fixed on the earth as he reflects on her efforts to raise him properly. He realizes that she has become a cornerstone of the peaceful life he is determined to protect, and he refuses to abandon her. With a sudden surge of intent, he invokes a power called canvas, causing a void-like pool to spread across the forest floor. He frantically considers what form his creation should take, searching for a way to overcome the impossible odds. His mind races, focusing intensely on the predator before him. He resolves to materialize a perfect copy of the basilisk dragon, pushing his mental speed to its absolute limit to complete the visualization. The drawing is finished in an instant, and a massive, spectral replica of the beast erupts from the dark ink. She watches in disbelief, her mind reeling at the possibility that the young boy is wielding high-level summoning magic. The two behemoths collide with bone-shattering force, but the strain begins to take its toll on him. His vision blurs as his mana reserves dwindle rapidly, yet he refuses to let his consciousness slip away. He bellows a defiant cry, drawing upon the professional grit of his former life to sustain the spell against the crushing pressure. She can only stare, paralyzed by the sheer intensity of his spirit. The summoned beast gains the upper hand, tearing into the original dragon with a savage, decisive strike that echoes through the woods. He remains standing, his arm trembling from the exhaustion of the feat, as the dust begins to settle on the battlefield. He slumps forward, his small body trembling with exhaustion, yet a faint, triumphant smile touches his lips. Through labored breaths, he whispers to himself that he succeeded, having finally ensured Arya's safety. As his strength fades, the massive spectral beast he summoned begins to dissolve, its form shimmering and then vanishing into thin air. Nearby, a hand emerges from the water, drenched and trembling as the magical construct dissipates completely. She stands amidst the clearing, her clothes soaked and her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stares at the boy in disbelief. Despite knowing his lineage and his supposed lack of magical aptitude, she is forced to reckon with the overwhelming power he just unleashed. Moving with a mix of awe and concern, she approaches his prone form. The elven tutor gently gathers the unconscious child into her arms, her expression a complex mask of exhaustion and newfound respect. Looking down at him, she confirms to herself that he is undeniably the son of Karl and Diva, possessing a potential that defies all expectation. The mother, Diva, weeps with overwhelming relief as she clutches her son, her voice trembling as she thanks the heavens for his return to consciousness. He stares back at her, dazed and disoriented, struggling to process the revelation that 3 full days have slipped away while he lay in a coma, his body spent from the total depletion of his magical reserves. His first thoughts turn to the elven maid's safety, and his mother quickly reassures him that she is unharmed, though she notes that his father is already assembling a group to hunt down the creature they believe responsible for his condition. She stands nearby in silence, her expression unreadable, leading the boy to realize that she has chosen to keep the true nature of his hidden abilities a secret from his parents, attributing his collapse to a monster instead. The elf leans in closer, her voice soft as she explains the lengths to which they went to save him, including the use of a rare, high-level elixir and the constant infusion of their own magic to stabilize his flickering life force. This news causes the mother to break down once more, her heart heavy with the guilt of the worries she caused, while the boy watches her, his own chest tightening with the realization of the burden his secret actions placed upon those he loves. Meanwhile, the search for the supposed culprit yielded nothing. as the father reports to the others that despite a thorough sweep of the area, the creature that allegedly drained his son's magic has vanished without a trace. The boy looks up at his father with a heavy heart, offering a sincere apology for the fear he instilled in them, but the man simply rests a hand on him, his relief far outweighing any need for an explanation as the family finally finds a moment of peace. He is barely conscious, his small frame leaning heavily against Arya as his mother cries out in alarm. Arya marvels at his endurance, noting that he managed to stay upright until his body simply gave out from the sheer strain of his ordeal. Later that night, the boy lies awake in the quiet of his room, the moonlight casting long shadows across his bed. He reflects on the terrifying reality of magic exhaustion, realizing that reaching 0 mana is akin to starving to death. Every fiber of his being feels as though it is being slowly pulled apart. The door creaks open, and she enters, her long silver hair cascading over a thin, translucent gown. Having heard his muffled groans of pain, she approaches with a look of deep concern, asking if he is having trouble finding sleep amidst the lingering ache in his soul. He immediately recoils, his face flushing a deep crimson as he tries to hide his flustered state behind a stuttered insistence that he is perfectly fine. She, however, is unconvinced, reaching out to check his temperature while he desperately tries to ignore the distracting sight of her delicate attire and the proximity of her chest. Seeing his distress, she softens her expression, deciding that she cannot simply leave him to suffer alone. He looks at her tired eyes and realizes she hasn't slept since his collapse 3 days ago, leading him to finally set aside his pride and accept her presence. She gently pulls him into a close embrace, her warmth enveloping his small, trembling form. While holding him, she explains that she will help circulate the stagnant magic within his body to ease the transition. She warns him that it will take time for his physical vessel to adapt to the increased mana capacity that follows such a total depletion. His heart hammers against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that he cannot seem to control. He recalls the image of her standing defiantly against danger to protect him, and for the first time, he finds himself seeing her not just as a guardian, but with a confusing, newfound intensity. The soothing heat of her body begins to dull the sharp edges of his pain, lulling him into a state of calm. He finds himself drifting, anchored only by the comforting sensation of her arms around him. In the quiet intimacy of the moment, he whispers an apology, his voice thick with a sudden, misplaced guilt. He asks if her recent coldness toward him is because she loves his father and views the boy as an obstacle to their bond, leaving her momentarily speechless. He continues his awkward confession, admitting his guilt for misinterpreting her feelings and fearing he had become an obstacle between her and his father. He expresses deep regret for the embarrassment he caused, acknowledging that he had failed to see the truth of her heart. In response to his vulnerability, she pulls him into a tender embrace, her voice soft as she asks for his forgiveness for the misunderstanding. She holds him close, seeking to soothe the boy's troubled conscience with her presence. The sudden closeness leaves him breathless, his heart racing as she whispers his name, her gaze intense and unwavering. He can only stammer in surprise, caught off guard by the depth of her focus on him. She leans in even closer, her expression serious as she clarifies that the thought of being his father's romantic partner has never once crossed her mind. Her words are firm, intended to dispel any lingering doubts he might harbor about her loyalty. Because of his persistent confusion, she elaborates on her deep respect for Carl as an employer and friend, while he struggles to reconcile this with the way he's seen her watching his father from afar. The conversation becomes a flurry of explanations and mutual embarrassment as they navigate the complex web of their perceptions. Shifting the focus entirely, she points a finger toward him and makes a startling declaration. She has only ever considered becoming his. The weight of her words hangs in the air, shifting the dynamic between them in an instant. This revelation leaves him reeling, his mind racing at the implication of being her vessel, while she explains that his unique nature makes him a prize any nation would covet. She speaks of him as a one-of-a-kind existence, far beyond the reach of ordinary men. As she continues, she marvels at the sheer scale of his potential, noting that summoning a creature as powerful as a basilisk at only 7 years old marks him as a truly exceptional summoner. She wonders aloud how much further his strength will grow as he matures. He feels a surge of both dread and anticipation, realizing that the power he wields feels less like a skill and more like a divine gift, one that carries a weight he is only beginning to understand. The realization that his abilities are not good in their sheer magnitude fills him with a strange sense of foreboding. Standing before him with a newfound sense of humility, she admits that she may no longer be fit to serve as the guardian for someone of his extraordinary destiny. She looks upon him not just as a child, but as a being of immense importance whose path she can no longer dictate. She gazes down at him with a mixture of intensity and curiosity, her elven features soft yet searching. In response, the young boy averts his eyes, a deep blush creeping across his cheeks as he feels the weight of her scrutiny. He is gripped by a sudden, internal panic, realizing that the expectations being placed upon him are growing far beyond his control. If this continues, he fears she might even uncover the truth of his reincarnation, forcing him to find a way to mask the true origin of his extraordinary abilities. Because of this mounting pressure, she presses him further, demanding to know why he has kept such immense power hidden for so long. She explains that summoners of his caliber are exceptionally rare, often elevated to the status of nobility and granted immense wealth and fame by the kingdom, making his secrecy all the more baffling to her. Seeing an opening in her line of questioning, He realizes this is his chance to steer the conversation, though he knows that revealing the truth will come with a heavy price. He begins to explain the reason for his secrecy, his expression turning somber as he prepares to share his deepest fears. The boy buries his face in his hands, his voice trembling as he confesses that his greatest fear is being torn away from his mother and father. He has hidden his powers solely to preserve the simple, happy life he shares with them, terrified that his gift would lead to their separation. As he speaks, he envisions his family and friends, his mother, father, and young Sheeta, standing before their modest home. His true dream is not for glory or noble titles, but to one day succeed his parents and run the family store, a future that would be utterly destroyed if he were forced into service as a royal summoner. Desperate to protect this humble future, he leans forward and pleads with her, begging that she keep his secret from everyone. She is momentarily stunned, struck by the fact that a child of his age has already considered his future with such profound gravity and selflessness. Despite his heartfelt plea, she reminds him that her current role as a servant prevents her from keeping such significant secrets from his parents. She looks at him with a softened gaze, acknowledging that while he is still just a child, his calm and peaceful life may already be reaching its inevitable end. Then, her expression shifts to one of solemn devotion as she proposes an alternative. If she were to become his woman rather than his servant, her primary loyalty would shift entirely to him. In that case, his wishes and his protection would become her absolute priority, above all other duties. He stares at her in utter confusion, struggling to grasp the weight of her words as she clarifies her intent. She explains that she would no longer be a mere servant, but would instead become his fated partner, bound to him by a connection far deeper than any contract of service. She stands before him, her proposal hanging in the air as the young boy's mind races through the implications. He realizes that such a bond is nothing short of marriage, a concept that both terrifies and excites him. Fearing that she might reveal his secret to his parents if he refuses, he decides to take a bold leap of faith to secure his future. With a sudden burst of courage, he declares his intention to marry her once he reaches adulthood, his face flushed with determination as he shouts his resolve. The elf is caught off guard, her cheeks turning a deep shade of crimson as she processes his passionate outburst. Seeing her stunned reaction, he immediately begins to fret, wondering if he has misinterpreted her offer or committed a grave social blunder. To his immense relief, she softly accepts his proposal, her expression a mix of shyness and genuine affection. He celebrates internally, feeling as though he has successfully navigated a perilous quest and secured his most important ally. They seal their pact with a solemn pinky promise, a childish but sincere gesture of their new bond. He makes it clear that both his identity as a summoner and their future engagement must remain a strict secret from his parents until he comes of age. As their fingers lock, she looks at him with a tender, committed gaze, fully accepting the weight of their shared secret. Under the quiet glow of the crescent moon, he reiterates the importance of their secrecy, warning that any slip-up with his mother or father would void their agreement. She simply nods, accepting the terms of their hidden life together. The following morning, under a bright sun, she expresses her desire to witness his summoning abilities firsthand. She is particularly curious about the contract he must have formed with the powerful basilisk, as such bonds are the foundation of a summoner's power and status. He tilts his head in genuine confusion, asking what a contract even is, a revelation that leaves her momentarily speechless. She had assumed he followed the traditional path of a mage, but his ignorance suggests his power operates on an entirely different level. To demonstrate his method, he focuses magic into his fingertip and visualizes a simple creature, successfully summoning a slime without any formal ritual or contract. She watches in disbelief, realizing that he possesses the rare and incredible ability to bring forth beings through sheer mental image alone. She watches him closely, her expression a mix of skepticism and curiosity as he asks if a specific summon is possible. Offering her own mana to bolster his efforts, she promises to support him, though he seems determined to test the limits of his own capabilities first. A nearby tome details the immense difficulty of summoning a golem, noting their inherent resistance to magic and the sheer inefficiency of the process for most practitioners. As he begins to sketch in the dirt, she leans in, questioning if this is some elaborate battle strategy, only for him to dismiss it as a lingering habit from a past life as a creator of stories. Despite her doubts, she remains convinced that without a formal contract, his attempt to bring such a complex entity into existence is destined for failure. The air suddenly crackles with power as the drawing is completed, and a massive, armored golem materializes from the ether, far exceeding the complexity of a standard summon. He notes with satisfaction that visualizing the form through a sketch significantly improved his success rate, while she can only stare in stunned silence at the impossible feat. Standing before the towering construct of stone and magic, she is gripped by a profound sense of disbelief, her mind racing to understand how he could bypass the fundamental requirement of a contract. She gazes at the young boy, realizing that he isn't just a genius, but an anomaly who completely defies the established laws of their world. When he turns to her with a bright smile, thanking her for the magical assistance, she recoils in a moment of pure, instinctual terror, perceiving him as a force of nature that could consume everything in its path. He, in turn, feels a sudden pang of regret, wondering if he has displayed far too much of his true potential. Reaching out to steady herself, she grips his shoulders with trembling hands, pleading with him to make a solemn vow as the sheer weight of the danger his power represents begins to sink in. Pulling him into a protective embrace, she commands him to never reveal this ability to another living soul, vowing to shield him from the world until she can truly comprehend the nature of the power he wields. He agrees readily, sealing their pact with a promise of secrecy that brings a flush of relief to her face as they stand together in the quiet aftermath of his revelation. She stands over the boy, her expression unyielding as he sprawls on the grass, gasping for breath. Despite his protests about his magical aptitude, she insists that his training must continue in secret until he reaches adulthood, reminding him of the promise they made to keep his true nature hidden. Because of his lack of progress, she declares that their rigorous sessions will proceed as usual until he masters the blade. From a distance, his parents watch the exchange with a mix of confusion and amusement, noting how quickly the two have become inseparable despite the harshness of the lessons. Moments later, the boy finds himself alone in a clearing, swinging a wooden sword with clumsy, exhausted strokes. He laments that while she promised to keep his secret, she has instead tripled the intensity of his training, leaving him wondering if he will even survive to see the results of this grueling regime. In response to the mounting physical toll, he decides that while training is necessary, suffering is not. He unfurls a fresh scroll and begins to sketch with frantic precision, manifesting the image of a legendary elixir to mend his aching body and restore his flagging spirits. As the final stroke is placed, the parchment begins to radiate a soft, ethereal light, signaling the completion of the drawing. He eagerly consumes the conjured liquid, and a wave of pure vitality washes over him. The exhaustion vanishes instantly, replaced by a surge of energy that restores his strength and magical reserves to their absolute peak, bringing a wide, relieved smile to his face. This legendary draft, spoken of only in myths for its ability to heal any wound and expand one's magical capacity, is now something he can produce at will. He marvels at the exhilarating sensation, comparing it to a potent tonic from his past life, though far more effective, and notes that his mana pool feels deeper than ever before. Reinvigorated, he returns to his chores with newfound ferocity, his wooden sword blurring as he executes a series of rapid strikes. He calls out his own improvised technique, the firewood-splitting dance, finding that even without formal swordsmanship, his enhanced physical state makes the labor effortless. Suddenly, a voice from behind breaks his concentration, asking what he had done with the scroll he was holding earlier. He spins around to find a young girl, Sheeta, watching him with a look of intense curiosity and a playful tilt of her head. The realization hits him like a physical blow. She had approached so quietly that he hadn't even sensed her presence. As he stares at her, his mind races with a single, terrifying question. Did she witness him bringing his drawing to life? Or did she only see the aftermath? A dark, ominous silhouette looms, its single eye glowing with a cold, piercing light. A voice echoes through the darkness, a desperate or demanding plea for help, stating that they need someone. Reaching out in response to its own summons, a heavy, stone-like hand extends forward, its fingers thick and textured, as if grasping for something just out of reach in the gloom. Akira is stunned, questioning if the young girl before him is some kind of wizard. He had never seen a technique like the one she just displayed. Metis, standing confidently with her sword, catches his eye. He wonders if she might be an aristocrat, given her refined appearance and the quality of her gear, a sword with a scabbard and a distinctive scar. She laughs heartily at his reaction, finding his way of speaking peculiar for a child. She teases him, saying he sounds like an old man. Akira, slightly embarrassed but caught up in her infectious energy, manages to change the subject, asking her how old she is. The girl reveals that she turned 7 this year. Her companion is shocked, exclaiming that he is 7 years old too. He had assumed she was older because she was taller, leading her to pout and ask why he keeps calling her a little kid if they are the same age. He realizes his mistake, noting to himself that his height might be seen as a disadvantage for a commoner. Seeing his discomfort, she quickly offers a sincere apology. She explains that she didn't mean anything by it, and certainly wasn't looking down on him for being a commoner. Her expression is bright and apologetic, showing her genuine nature. He feels a sense of relief, glad that he managed to steer the conversation away from the sensitive topic of the elixir. He observes her, noting that for an aristocrat, she seems to possess a surprising amount of common sense and humility. As they walk together, she notices he was in the middle of chopping firewood and offers to help. Akira tries to decline, telling her not to overdo it, but she insists. She admits she might have gotten a bit too worked up earlier and apologizes again for her tone, showing a level of honesty that Akira finds refreshing. She explains that for her, chopping wood isn't just a chore, it's part of her training for swordsmanship. She begins to instruct him, pointing out that a sword's center of gravity is different from an axe's. The young boy listens intently, realizing the logic in her words as she prepares to show him the proper grip. She demonstrates the technique, showing him exactly how to position his hands on the handle. She emphasizes the importance of the grip, guiding him through the fundamentals of handling a blade with precision. She stands ready, instructing the boy to hurl the heavy log toward her, claiming words alone cannot explain the lesson she intends to provide. Though confused by the request, he complies, tossing the wood through the air with a grunt of effort. With a fluid, dance-like motion that defies the eye, she draws her blade and strikes. The log is severed in an instant, the pieces falling away before the boy can even register the movement of her steel. He stands frozen, his mind racing to comprehend the sheer speed of the display. The young noblewoman remains calm, her skill evident in her effortless posture. The boy realizes he is in the presence of a true master, one whose grace rivals even that of the elf, Arya. He wonders if such prowess is common among the aristocracy, while she finds his genuine amazement quite endearing. She then offers a formal introduction, her voice bright and full of pride. She identifies herself as Metis Blindstard, the daughter of Count Blindstard, the newly appointed Lord of Stromheim. The revelation of her high status leaves the boy speechless, his mind reeling at the thought of standing before the daughter of a count. She explains that as a newcomer to the area, she is seeking a friend who can guide her through the unfamiliar sights of the city. Seeing his stunned expression, she asks if her identity was truly that much of a shock. However, the boy's confusion stems from a different source. He blushes furiously as she suddenly realizes a fundamental misunderstanding, exclaiming in surprise that he is, in fact, a boy. She bursts into laughter, admitting that she had treated him like a lady simply because of his adorable appearance. While he stammers out an embarrassed apology, feeling as though he might be the victim of some aristocratic harassment, she playfully asks for his name to clear the air. He finally finds his voice, introducing himself as Akira Rainford. He explains that he is the son of the owner of the Rainford Magic Shop located within the city, a detail that catches her off guard. She is genuinely impressed, noting that it is rare for the son of a magic shop owner to dedicate himself so earnestly to the way of the sword. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she declares him her very first friend in this new city and asks for his continued support, leaving him flustered by her directness. They reach out and clasp hands, sealing their unexpected bond. As they do, the boy reflects on the encounter, realizing that despite her noble blood, she is far more approachable and kind-hearted than he ever could have imagined. He stands before his new friend as she proposes a meeting for the following day at the same hour. Metis' enthusiasm is infectious, her hands clasped in anticipation of their next encounter and the promise of a growing bond. The agreement is struck with a clear purpose. She will act as his guide to the city's intricacies, while he will share his knowledge of the blade. His gaze is fixed, absorbing the weight of this new arrangement and the responsibilities it entails. Despite the simple nature of their bond, the complexities of social standing and the potential for misunderstanding loom in the background. It is a delicate balance between the world of commoners and the expectations of the nobility, a reality that weighs on his mind. A few days pass, leading to a much more intimate setting within the steam of a shared bath. Arya holds him firmly, ignoring his flustered protests that he is no longer a child who needs such close supervision. She insists on the tradition of counting to 100 before he is allowed to leave the warm water, a rule set by his mother. The young boy continues to struggle with the situation, but his companion remains unmoved, citing the practical necessity of saving firewood by bathing together. He finds her logic difficult to counter, even as his face flushes with embarrassment at her unwavering and sharp gaze. Attempting to assert some independence, he begins to scrub his own back, eager to finish before his mother arrives. Arya watches him with a calm, almost teasing expression, her presence filling the small, humid space as she reminds him that Diva will be joining them soon. She leans closer, her voice dropping to a more serious tone as she inquires whether he has had the chance to study the volume she provided during their last meeting. Her eyes search his, looking for a sign of comprehension regarding the magical knowledge contained within. The question sparks a memory, and he admits that he was just about to seek her guidance regarding a specific passage. The steam around them seems to thicken as the conversation shifts from domestic chores toward more arcane and complex matters. His thoughts race through the complexities of magical theory he discovered in the text, specifically the impossibility of forming contracts with soulless, inorganic entities. Yet, he has already achieved the impossible by manifesting an elixir, a feat that fills him with a growing sense of dread. If the true nature of his unique abilities were to be discovered, the quiet life he cherishes would surely vanish. Sensing his internal conflict, she asks once more if the knowledge within the book proved beneficial. He offers a sincere confirmation, acknowledging that the information was indeed vital to his understanding of the world's hidden rules, even as he hides the full extent of his discovery. She leans in close, her expression grave as she delivers a stern warning. Attempting to summon a high-level being without sufficient magic is a death sentence. They pore over the ancient texts together, studying the intricate diagrams of golems and divine beasts, as she reminds him that their goal is to safely understand the true nature of his unique abilities. He listens intently, but his mind wanders to the legends of the red-eyed hero, a figure of immense power who was said to be the strongest human in existence. Despite the allure of such legendary strength, he recalls the solemn promise he made to avoid the dangers of summoning magic for now. Seeing his distraction, she shifts the conversation to her own aspirations, expressing her desire to one day lead the magic shop as its second-generation proprietor. She playfully teases him about his youthful curiosity, asking if he secretly dreams of becoming a legendary figure himself. Later that evening, the young boy is startled from his thoughts when his mother bursts into the bathhouse, apologizing for her tardiness. He yelps in surprise as she prepares to join him, a common practice in their household to conserve resources. The following days are filled with more mundane tasks, as he practices his counting under the watchful eye of his mentor. They stand overlooking the peaceful village, the quiet rhythm of daily life masking the growing concerns of the adults. After another long day, he rushes to get dressed as his mother fussily tries to dry his damp hair. Their domestic routine is interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, and he brightly welcomes his father home. The man's face is etched with a grim seriousness that immediately dampens the mood. His wife notices his troubled expression and asks if something went wrong during his time at the Merchant Guild. He takes a heavy breath before delivering the chilling news. The evil cult has resurfaced and has begun kidnapping children from the surrounding areas. The room falls silent as the weight of his words sinks in. The discussion turns to the dark rumors surrounding the cult, including whispers of human sacrifices and the recent arrest of a man carrying their sinister emblem. With 2 children already missing from the city, the threat feels dangerously close to home. Looking directly at his son, the father issues a stern warning to avoid any secluded places and to stay close to home. The boy stares back, his mind racing as the reality of an evil cult suddenly shatters the peace of his childhood. He collapses to the ground, gasping for air as the gap in their abilities becomes painfully clear. Medi stands over him, barely winded, questioning his lack of resolve while he admits he cannot even land a scratch on her during their practice. As they catch their breath, she shifts the conversation to a darker topic, asking if he has heard the rumors of the evil cult that has begun kidnapping children in the area. The weight of the news settles over them as they sit together on a grassy hill, overlooking the path home. She suggests they head back immediately to ensure their parents do not worry about the looming threat of these evil people. He admits his fear, confessing that as a mere commoner, he never intended for his swordsmanship training to lead him into such dangerous territory. She listens in silence, her expression unreadable as he explains that such terrifying things did not exist when he was younger, and he is genuinely afraid of facing such people. She counters his hesitation with a stern lesson on the burden of strength, reminding him that those with power also carry an equal amount of responsibility. He is left questioning his own motivations, wondering why he is even pursuing the blade if not to face such challenges, especially when his teacher expects so much from his talent. Leaning in close, her gaze intensifies as she asks him to consider the consequences of a talented individual failing because they overextended themselves. She warns that if the responsibility isn't carried to the very end, all previous efforts and the lives spent training become meaningless. A heavy silence falls between them, her eyes casting downward as the gravity of her words hangs in the air. The tension breaks abruptly when she stands and announces her departure, leaving him bewildered by her sudden shift in mood. He watches her walk away, frantically wondering if his words had somehow offended her or if he had simply failed to meet her expectations. He calls out to her as she retreats into the distance, but she does not turn back, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Suddenly, a strange, sweet aroma fills the air, clouding his senses and making his limbs feel heavy with an unnatural sleepiness. As his vision blurs and he searches for his friend, he realizes too late that something is very wrong before consciousness slips away. He recalls the stern warning from his father, who stood beside his mother, advising him to avoid secluded areas for the time being due to rising dangers. Arya had echoed this sentiment, urging him to keep his swordsmanship practice near the safety of the house. He had intended to follow her advice, hoping to train without drawing Medi's attention, but those plans were now a distant memory. The boy awakens to a cold, hard floor, his limbs heavy and restricted by iron shackles. Around him, the air is thick with the soft, rhythmic sobbing of other children huddled in the shadows of a stone room. His eyes dart around the dim space, landing on the cold iron bars that hem them in. Confusion turns to dread as he calls out for his mother, realizing with a jolt that this is not his room. A chilling memory of his father's voice resurfaces, explaining the grim reality that the evil cult preys upon children, using them as sacrifices for their dark rituals. He stares down at his bound wrists, the metal cold against his skin, as the weight of his situation begins to sink in. The horrifying truth becomes undeniable. He has been taken by the very cult his father warned him about, and he is now a prisoner in their clutches. Amidst the despair, a familiar voice mumbles nearby. Medes lies on the floor, deep in a dream about food, seemingly unaware of their predicament. He can hardly believe his eyes, wondering why she is here in this cage with him. Slowly, she begins to stir, her eyes fluttering open as the reality of the cold floor replaces her dreams of a feast. She bolts upright, her confusion mirroring his own as she takes in the sight of the other frightened children and demands to know where they are. She was quickly silenced by her companion, who urged her to keep her voice down to avoid alerting the other captives or their captors. The realization of their predicament hit her with a wave of dread. They had indeed been kidnapped by the notorious cult, and the gravity of their situation began to sink in. As he stared at the iron bars, the memory of a solemn promise made to Arya echoed in his mind, a vow never to reveal the true extent of his abilities to anyone. He weighed the options, fearing that breaking the bars might cause the structure to collapse upon them. Yet he wondered if he could mask his magic as a mere summoning spell to avoid suspicion. The young boy remained locked in thought, his expression hardening as he acknowledged that this was a life-threatening situation where secrecy might have to take a backseat to survival. He knew that hiding his power was important, but the immediate danger demanded a more direct response. While his friend frantically explained that the cult intended to use them as sacrifices and lamented the loss of their weapons, he remained remarkably composed, seeing an opportunity in being brought directly to the enemy's lair. He declared with unwavering certainty that they would not only break out, but also rescue every other child held within those walls, leaving her stunned by his sudden shift in demeanor and bold resolve. Suddenly, a surge of heat filled the air as a captive woman unleashed a devastating torrent of flame magic known as Blaze Pain, her chains rattling against the force of her power. The intense light of the flames illuminated the dark prison, signaling a turning point in their captivity. The young boy watched in absolute awe, his eyes wide as he witnessed the raw intensity of the magical display unfolding before him. The sheer power of the flames seemed to ignite a new sense of hope within him. Nearby, an unseen observer gasped in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how a mere child could possess such a high level of mastery over both swordsmanship and the arcane arts. The realization that this boy was no ordinary captive sent a ripple of shock through those watching. The woman's left eye began to glow with a piercing crimson light as she spoke of the heavy burden borne by the powerful, promising to shield him from the darkness that surrounded them. Her words carried the weight of ancient duty, and she vowed to teach him what it truly meant to protect others. With a defiant surge of energy, she prepared to shatter her remaining bonds, her presence radiating the unmistakable aura of a legendary savior. As she gathered her strength, the air crackled with magic, heralding the arrival of a force that the cult could not hope to contain. She is not the only one watching the unfolding chaos. From the deepest shadows, a massive, jagged silhouette looms, its single, piercing white eye fixed on the scene. The entity's voice rumbles through the darkness, a heavy, resonant command that carries the weight of an ancient plea. They need her. As the entity speaks, its form shifts, revealing a body composed of heavy, weathered stone or ancient, segmented armor. It moves with a slow, grinding deliberation, its massive, block-like head and powerful limbs suggesting a creature of immense, dormant power finally beginning to stir in response to the crisis. Legends speak of a being known as the God of War, a hero blessed with the dual talents of sword and magic. Her most defining trait is her crimson eyes, specifically a left eye that radiates a brilliant red light. There is no mistaking it. The figure before them is that legendary savior. He realizes that with such a powerful presence nearby, the need to summon a golem has vanished. This unexpected turn of events feels like a hidden trump card finally being played, shifting the balance of their desperate situation. The young boy's resolve hardens as he looks toward the future. He believes they can finally escape this dark place, placing all his trust in Medivh's capabilities to lead them to safety. She demonstrates her power immediately, using magic to melt the heavy iron bars of their cell as if they were mere wax. He watches in awe, realizing she is no ordinary noble. She commands him to stay close, promising to be his shield as they move to rescue the other captives, emphasizing that explanations can wait until they are free. As they step out into the corridor, they are immediately intercepted by their captors. The hooded figures demand to know how the children managed to break free from their confinement, their voices dripping with hostility. They are the members of the sinister cult, their masked faces twisted in surprise and malice. The realization of who they are facing adds a new layer of danger to the escape, as the children find themselves cornered. The girl stands her ground, ordering her companion to stay back while she handles the threat. One of the cultists unleashes a searing blast of magical fire, aiming to incinerate the young intruders where they stand. She counters the attack with a massive pillar of flame of her own, completely neutralizing the cultist's spell. The hooded men are stunned, unable to comprehend how a mere child possesses such overwhelming magical strength and the ability to counteract their dark arts so effortlessly. Not content with just magic, she lunges forward with blinding speed. She weaves through their ranks, her movements a blur as she strikes down the cultists before they can even react to her presence, proving herself to be a formidable warrior in both spellcraft and physical combat. She unleashes a torrent of fire, the Gaddis flame, leaving the cultists in a state of utter disbelief. They can hardly process that a mere child with such piercing red eyes could possess such devastating power. Seeing her overwhelm their captors with nothing but her bare hands and raw magic, he is struck by a sudden surge of hope. They realize that escape is finally within their grasp, and they must move quickly before reinforcements can swarm their position. While he eagerly suggests they make their break for freedom immediately, she has a far more audacious plan in mind. With a fierce, determined grin, she declares that they shouldn't just run. They should find and defeat the leader of this dark cult right here and now. The weight of her suggestion hangs heavy in the air, leaving him momentarily speechless as he stares at her in a mix of awe and terror. Her gaze remains fixed, burning with a resolve that brooks no argument. A brief, awkward silence follows as the sheer absurdity of the situation sinks in, leaving him blinking in confusion while she simply turns away, already focused on the path ahead. Far from the damp cells of the cult, Arya attempts to provide some measure of comfort to Diva, who is overcome with grief. She assures the distraught mother that Carl and the town guards have already mobilized a full-scale search for the missing children. Despite these reassurances, Diva's composure shatters completely, her face contorted in an agony of uncertainty as the reality of her son's disappearance truly takes hold. She frantically paces the room, convinced that this is no ordinary disappearance and that the involvement of the guards only proves how dire the situation has become. Her mind spirals into dark places, fearing that Akira has already been taken by the evil cult to a location beyond any hope of rescue. Arya remains a pillar of calm, insisting that the boy is far more resourceful and intelligent than anyone realizes. Back in the depths of the hideout, he can barely believe his ears as she reiterates her intent to take down the boss, even as Arya's distant hope echoes the sentiment that he will surely return home safely. He stares at her with a mix of disbelief and mounting frustration, his voice rising as he questions the sheer recklessness of her proposal. While he acknowledges her incredible strength, he points out the glaring flaw in her plan. They have no idea how many enemies they are actually facing, and charging in without information is suicide. Continuing his plea for reason, he argues that a blind charge into the unknown is nothing short of a gamble they cannot afford to lose. He insists that their best course of action is to prioritize their own escape first, then seek out the adults who can provide the necessary reinforcements to handle the cult properly. She meets his gaze with a calm, almost piercing intensity, asking if he truly believes she would simply lose control and act without thought. The question catches him off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless as he struggles to find a response to her sudden seriousness. Her expression softens slightly, but her words remain heavy with a grim reality that he hadn't considered. She explains that even if they managed to flee and report the location of this hideout to the authorities, the consequences for those left behind would be dire and immediate. The weight of her implication finally sinks in, and his eyes widen with a sudden, chilling realization. He asks, his voice barely a whisper, what would become of the other children who are still held captive within these dark walls if they were to leave them behind? She presents the two most likely outcomes with a cold, analytical tone that chills him to the bone. Either the cultists would abandon the children when help arrived, or, more likely, they would eliminate all evidence of their crimes, including the witnesses, before the guards could reach them. He stands frozen, the harsh truth of their situation echoing in his mind as he realizes there is no easy way out. Sensing his hesitation, she asks him once more to reconsider his stance on simply running away, forcing him to confront the moral weight of the choice he is making. His hand tightens into a trembling fist, the leather of his glove creaking under the strain of his internal conflict. He finds himself unable to argue against her logic, feeling the crushing pressure of a responsibility he never asked for but cannot ignore. She admits that her own perspective might be simplistic, yet she maintains a flicker of hope, suggesting that her magic combined with his unique abilities might be enough to tip the scales in their favor. Despite her optimism, he remains haunted by the very real possibility of failure and the death that would surely follow a lost battle. Finally, his fear boils over into a desperate shout, his face contorted with the raw intensity of his emotion. He reminds her that this isn't just about the other captives. If they challenge the cult and fail, they will both lose their lives right here in the dark. He can only watch in horror as his companion's face contorts with pure, unadulterated terror, her eyes wide with the realization of the nightmare unfolding around them. She lies paralyzed as the cultists continue their grim work, their voices echoing through the cavern as a blinding pillar of light erupts from the central altar. They observe that while the souls of these children may be small in quantity, their absolute purity makes them an invaluable resource for the ritual's completion. They are joined by a woman in ornate armor who watches the energy transfer with a dark, reverent fascination. She confesses that the sight of the light of life being harvested always sends a shiver through her, marveling at how decades of potential existence are being condensed into a single exchange of energy for her mysterious master. The young boy and his companion stand in the quiet stone corridor, a heavy silence hanging between them as their conflicting views reach a boiling point. He tries to reason with her, insisting that he should face the danger alone to keep the others safe, but she remains steadfast. She counters his argument, stating that she is willing to bet her life on what she believes in and that he shouldn't have to carry the burden of escape while others are in peril. Without another word, she turns and sprints away, leaving him frozen in shock. He watches her retreating figure, his face contorted with frustration as he realizes she doesn't understand the sheer danger of the evil cult they are facing. They eventually find themselves deep within the damp, echoing chambers of a massive limestone cave. From their vantage point, they can see the crashing waves of the north coast and a sinister altar topped with a suspicious statue, confirming they are not far from the city. Suddenly, a sharp instinct flares within him, and he urgently pulls her down into a crouch to avoid detection. Peering over the jagged rocks, they witness a grim procession of hooded figures carrying limp children toward the altar. The sight ignites a cold, righteous fury in his heart, as he realizes the true depth of the cult's depravity. Before he can stop her, she leaps from their hiding spot, her voice ringing out with authority as she demands the heartless captors release the children and repent for their sins. He can only watch in horror, fearing that her provocation has just sealed their fate. As the echoes of her challenge fade, a towering, masked figure looms over them, her voice dripping with a chilling, mock affection as she addresses the two children. They turn to find the high priestess herself standing right behind them, her presence radiating an overwhelming and suffocating power. She watches with cold amusement as a sudden burst of fire magic erupts, noting the child's ability to cast without a chant. Before she can act, a new figure leaps into the fray, a warrior woman who commands the children to retreat while she takes on the cultists herself. Dismissing the children as mere nuisances, the priestess focuses her gaze on the newcomer. The warrior, Karami-Eyes, doesn't hesitate, charging forward with a speed that leaves Akira breathless and wide-eyed with shock. As the warrior draws her blade, a brilliant light emanates from the steel, illuminating the dark cave. The priestess's eyes widen behind her mask as she recognizes the legendary crimson eyes and the unmistakable aura of a magic sword. She realizes she is facing the one known as the hero. The cave erupts into a chaotic skirmish as Karami-Eyes carves through the hooded figures with practiced ease. Amidst the clashing steel and shouting, she warns the children to stay back, her focus entirely on the overwhelming number of enemies surrounding her. Standing tall against the tide of darkness, the hero demands a duel, challenging the masked leader to face her one-on-one. Akira pleads for her to stop, but she remains steadfast, declaring her intent to protect the weak and show the boy the true meaning of justice. Her voice rings out with unwavering conviction, her eyes burning with a righteous fire. She proclaims that her beliefs and her sense of justice will never forgive the atrocities committed here, and that they will ultimately prevail. In response, the priestess's expression shifts into something far more sinister and twisted. A dark, predatory gleam appears in her eye as she observes the hero's display of purity and resolve. She begins to tremble, not with fear, but with a disturbing, ecstatic excitement at the prospect of corrupting such an undertied soul. The children watch in horror as the woman moans about the thrill of the hunt, her obsession with the hero's pure heart becoming sickeningly clear. Suddenly, the ground beneath them begins to glow with an ominous, pulsating light. A massive, intricate magic circle manifests across the cavern floor, signaling the arrival of a power far greater than the simple cultists they had been fighting. With a triumphant cry, the priestess calls forth a specialized horror, a creature she labels a hero killer. She mocks the warrior's naive justice, preparing to sacrifice everything to crush the light that Karamiyai's represents. She summons a towering stone golem, its massive form materializing with a heavy, grinding sound. Akira stares up in disbelief, his mind racing as he realizes the enemy leader possesses the rare and dangerous power of a summoner. Deep within the shadows, a massive, jagged silhouette looms, its single white eye piercing the darkness. It speaks with a voice that seems to vibrate through the very air, declaring a dire necessity for someone's presence. Nearby, the armored sentinel stands motionless, a silent guardian beside a hooded figure shrouded in the gloom. The battlefield erupts with the realization that their opponent is a summoner of immense power, as a massive, intricate summoning circle glows with ominous light across the ground. Facing such a foe seems impossible given the vast gap in combat experience, especially now that an intermediate-level golem has been brought forth to crush any resistance. He watches in growing dread, his mind racing through the dire possibilities if Medes were to fall against such a formidable construct. He wonders if his own unique drawing ability is the only hope left, even as Arya looks on with silent concern. Despite the looming threat of the massive stone guardian, she remains remarkably composed, her face lit with an ecstatic, almost predatory confidence that defies the overwhelming odds. He is taken aback by her lack of fear, but she quickly reassures him, explaining that while a golem might be resistant to standard fire magic, she has a way to amplify her power to a level that will shatter its defenses. With a sudden surge of energy, she begins a complex incantation, her voice ringing out as she calls upon the bird of Inferno to fly from its sanctuary. He can only watch in awe as the strongest spell he has ever witnessed begins to take shape. Her eyes burn with an intense, crimson light as she pours her very spirit into the magic, commanding the flames to consume everything in their path. The air itself seems to ignite, transforming from simple fire into a devastating blaze of pure magical energy that defies common understanding. From the heart of the Inferno, a magnificent and terrifying creature of living flame erupts, the Gehenna Phoenix, ready to turn the tide of the battle. She watches as her fiery creation slams into the Stone Guardian, but the High Priestess merely scoffs at the display. While Akira looks on in awe at the massive bird of flame, the enemy remains unmoved, noting that even strong fire magic shouldn't be able to withstand the golem's defenses. As the smoke dissipates, the young girl's heart sinks. The golem stands perfectly intact, without even a scratch on its surface. The High Priestess erupts into mocking laughter, deriding the firework display, while Akira realizes with horror that the attack failed to incinerate their opponent as intended. Seizing the moment of despair, the masked woman towers over her, belittling her efforts as mere imitation magic. She offers a cruel ultimatum, suggesting that if the child begs for forgiveness immediately, she might consider overlooking the transgression. Despite the overwhelming pressure, the young mage refuses to yield, declaring she would never apologize to a heretic even if it meant her death. As the golem's massive stone fingers begin to close around her, Akira watches in a desperate panic, realizing he must find a way to intervene before it's too late. The heavy hand of the construct descends with crushing force, pinning her as Akira's screams of terror echo through the chamber. The High Priestess mocks the girl's stubbornness, telling her to drop the brave front and simply apologize to end the suffering. Bloodied but unbowed, she spits back her defiance, swearing never to cave to such scum. This refusal only sharpens the antagonist's cruelty, as she decides that since the girl's conviction won't fold, perhaps a different kind of discipline is required. Shifting her gaze, the priestess targets the boy instead, labeling him the bad kid's friend to be used as a lesson. Akira recoils in fear as she explains that adults have many ways to deal with troublesome children, and he is the perfect example. From her position of helplessness, the battered girl watches with wide, tear-filled eyes as the threat shifts toward her companion. The realization that her friend will be punished in her stead brings a new level of agony to her face, far worse than her physical injuries. With a sadistic grin, the masked woman tells her to burn this moment into her memory, claiming that while she might have spared a good kid, this tragedy is the direct result of the girl's own stubbornness. As the danger to Akira becomes absolute, her resolve finally shatters into a desperate, tearful scream. She bellows an apology, her pride discarded in a frantic attempt to save her friend from the fate the High Priestess has prepared for him. She continues to sob, her voice cracking as she admits her arrogance and begs for mercy, not for herself, but for the boy. She pleads with the High Priestess to spare him, her pride completely shattered as she urges him to flee while he still can, admitting they should have called for help from the start. He stands frozen, watching the girl who was once so full of life break down in front of him. Her screams for him to run and save himself echo across the clearing, but he cannot bring himself to move as he witnesses her desperate sacrifice. Despite her terror, She remains focused on his safety, offering to endure any humiliation or punishment the High Priestess demands as long as he is allowed to go free. His expression shifts, the shock fading into a grim, focused intensity as he watches her struggle. A profound realization takes hold of him. He sees her in a completely new light, moved by the depth of her character. He understands now that her tears aren't born of a fear for her own life, but from a crushing sense of responsibility for his. She is willing to discard her very identity as a noble and bend her ideals to ensure his survival, even if it means appearing powerless. This selfless display forces him to reflect on his own past life, where he pursued success at the cost of those around him. He recalls his former self as someone who prioritized results over people, contrasting his cold ambition with her genuine, protective nobility. To him, this is the mark of a true leader, a standard of character he never managed to achieve in his previous existence. A new fire ignites in his eyes, a cold and calculated resolve replacing his earlier hesitation. He steps forward, his voice steady as he tells her to stop, assuring her that she has done nothing wrong and that the burden of apology is no longer hers to bear. He reflects on his own past, acknowledging that power shouldn't be used to hurt others, and resolves to act differently than he once did. Looking toward their captors, his mind is made up about how power should truly be wielded. He roars with a newfound conviction, declaring that true strength is found in selflessness. He realizes that the person he always aspired to be is someone who uses their power for the sake of others, just as Metis did for him. Akira stands before the vast, empty space of the battlefield, his mind racing as he prepares to manifest his creation. He questions if his magic can hold up, knowing Metis has been taken hostage and there is no turning back now. Having pushed his body to the limit with elixirs, he realizes the weight of the moment depends entirely on his ability to perform. Seeing the scale of the magic gathering, Arya gasps in disbelief, wondering if the boy is truly a summoner. Even Koku, watching from her vantage point, is stunned that a mere child could manifest such advanced summoning magic, a feat that even high-level summoners struggle to achieve with such a massive contract. He feels the crushing weight of the spell, his vision blurring as his magic reserves dwindle dangerously low. Metis' voice cuts through the haze of his concentration, warning him that recklessly performing a high-level summoning alone will lead to total magic depletion and certain death. In the midst of the strain, his mind drifts back to a different kind of pressure, where he sat hunched over a desk in his former life. His editor was rejecting his designs for being too complex for a weekly serialization, warning him that he would burn out before the series even began if he didn't simplify his work. The memory of Kamishiro rings in his ears, demanding he preserve the uniqueness of his characters while making them manageable for the grueling pace of a professional. He remembers the professional pride he felt even then, refusing to do a half-hearted job despite the crushing deadlines and the trauma of his rookie days. This realization sparks a new strategy. If the current design demands more magic than he possesses, he will simplify the form while keeping the core essence of the character's personality intact. He reaches out, his eyes burning with a renewed sense of purpose as he adapts his vision to the reality of his power. As the light intensifies to a blinding degree, Arya screams his name in terror, fearing the power will consume him. Koku shields her eyes, frustrated by the radiance as the summoning nears its completion and the golem begins to take physical shape. He finally exhales, the nerve-wracking process complete as he narrowly avoids being overwhelmed by his own creation. By reworking the design on the fly to match his current power level, he has managed to meet the ultimate deadline and bring his drawing to life. Standing tall and imposing, the result of his labor is revealed, a massive, heavily armored advanced golem, born from his original design and refined by necessity. It looms over the battlefield, a testament to his skill and survival instinct. He stands before the massive construct, leaving Metis in a state of utter disbelief that a mere 7-year-old could manifest such a creature. While Arya trembles in fear, he remains pragmatic, urging them to use this opening to escape and seek help from more experienced adults. Metis, watching him, is struck by a sudden, sharp realization of her own arrogance in doubting his potential. As they prepare to move, Arya gazes at him with newfound awe, her cheeks flushed as she realizes the sheer scale of the person standing beside her. He, however, remains focused on the task at hand, his expression tight with the effort of maintaining the summit. Across the battlefield, Koku erupts into mocking laughter, dismissing the feat as a mere trick. She sneers at the impossibility of altering a summoned beast's form mid-manifestation, demanding they stop their desperate games. She continues her critique, pointing out the golem's disproportionate, petite lower half and its single, solitary arm. He doesn't deny the flaws, admitting that he intentionally stripped the design down to its bare essentials to fit his limited magical reserves, even if the result is a messy, lopsided warrior. Despite its appearance, she cannot deny the raw power radiating from the advanced golem. With a sudden, violent surge of motion, the lopsided titan lunges forward, its single massive fist striking with enough force to shatter the very ground. In the heat of the moment, he recalls a vital lesson shared by Arya during their quieter moments. The key to victory isn't defeating the summon itself, but ensuring the safety of their allies while neutralizing the enemy summoner. He knows that if the master falls, the beast will inevitably follow. His eyes narrow with a fierce, unwavering resolve as he prepares to execute his plan. The time for defense has passed. The counterattack begins now. The fundamental laws of summoning are clear. The existence of the beast is tied directly to the consciousness of its master. Should the summoner fall, the connection severs, and the construct dissolves into nothingness. He feels his magical reserves dwindling, the strain of maintaining the massive golem weighing heavily on his young frame. Realizing that his construct is reaching its limit, he concludes that their only hope lies in neutralizing the one controlling the enemy forces before his own power fades completely. With this desperate plan in mind, he turns his attention to his fallen comrade, hoisting her onto his back with a grunt of exertion. His priority shifts from combat to extraction, determined to get her far from the immediate danger. Behind them, the massive stone sentinel continues its relentless advance, its rocky limbs grinding with a sound like a mountain collapsing. He sprints through the debris, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he carries his heavy burden toward the exit. His retreat does not go unnoticed, as the dark sorceress watches with an amused, predatory glint in her eyes, mocking his attempt to escape. She laughs, a sharp, grating sound that echoes through the cavern, clearly enjoying the sight of her prey in flight. He, however, is struck by a sudden, chilling realization. His attempt to disrupt her control has failed, and as she prepares to reveal the golem's natural elemental weakness, the situation becomes far more dire than he anticipated. As he continues his frantic flight, a blinding blue light erupts behind him, heralding the arrival of an even greater terror. From a swirling vortex of arcane energy, the divine beast Leviathan emerges, its serpentine form radiating an overwhelming aura of power. The sorceress sneers at the children's perceived weakness, boasting of the intermediate summon she has just unleashed to counter his earth-based creation. He watches in horror, never having witnessed a summon of such magnitude before, as she directs the water aspect dragon to strike, its massive jaws opening to release a devastating wave of elemental energy. Koku mocks the desperate attempt to shield the golem with a wall of earth, her voice dripping with condescension as Arya cries out in terror for her companions. Suddenly, the construct retaliates by unleashing a massive destructive beam, forcing the antagonist to realize she is facing a far more advanced entity than she initially presumed. The boy explains that his creation isn't limited to mere defense. It possesses the unique capability to counter water-based assaults, a revelation that leaves his opponent momentarily stunned. The beam tears through the air with a deafening roar, striking the massive aquatic serpent and sending shockwaves across the battlefield. She stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a mere child could have the capacity to form a contract with such a high-level senior golem. The young summoner doesn't let up, commanding a secondary breath attack while urgently shouting for the injured Metis to distance herself from the front lines. Despite the valiant effort, the golem is shattered in a single, overwhelming blow by the superior elemental force, leaving him to curse his own weakness as his allies watch the destruction in horror. He feels his magic reserves run dry, the weight of impending defeat pressing down as he desperately searches for a spark of inspiration to survive, wondering if this is truly the end of his journey in this world. In this moment of absolute crisis, a memory of his editor surfaces from his past life, reminding him that even when stumped for ideas, he has never been one to run away from a challenge. The man's voice echoes in his mind with profound clarity, asserting that the true essence of a creator's talent isn't found in their technical skill, but in the raw creativity that moves hearts and brings entire worlds to life. He stares ahead with wide, trembling eyes, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. If this world is truly his own creation, then the solution to this impossible situation must lie within his own design. His gaze falls upon a massive, unrolled scroll lying discarded on the dusty ground, its blank surface a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. The boy declares his intent to draw a restorative elixir directly onto the parchment, a desperate gamble that draws a mocking laugh from his adversary. She sneers, convinced that this is the final move in their deadly game. As the monstrous Leviathan unleashes a devastating torrent of water, the young creator remains defiant, certain that he can replenish his strength. His companion watches in terror while their enemy celebrates what she believes is an inevitable victory. However, the light fades from his eyes as he realizes the crushing truth. His magical tool is completely spent. He curses his own short-sightedness, staring at the empty vessel that was once his greatest weapon. He recalls the teachings of the mages regarding the art of infusing objects with power, but the memory only brings despair. Without the innate abilities of a true sorcerer, such techniques are forever out of his reach. Seeing his hesitation, the dark sorceress taunts him, her voice dripping with malice as she asks if his well of ideas has finally run dry. She prepares to strike, eager to see how his physical form fares against her magic. From the sidelines, the silver-haired girl screams for him to flee, begging him to save himself now that his strength is gone. He looks back, his expression a mask of shock and mounting dread. Despite the overwhelming fear, he lunges toward the scroll, his fingers tightening around the useless stylus as he refuses to give up on his last hope. Suddenly, his companion rushes forward and seizes the parchment, a look of fierce determination replacing her fear. She realizes that while he lacks the power, she possesses the skill to infuse the scroll with the magic he so desperately needs. She watches as the stark realization hits him, a silent scream echoing through his mind that he simply cannot wield magic in the traditional sense. He recalls standing before Metis, dejected and literally smoking from failed attempts, forced to admit his total lack of magical aptitude despite his initial expectations of greatness. Because of this unique talent, he realized he could bypass traditional casting by drawing on pre-imbued scrolls, a method that defies the established laws of magic preservation. He shouts with determination, urging his golem to give its all as he activates the scroll's power. Koku laughs as debris rains down, dismissing the struggle as a desperate, self-destructive gamble. She watches with a predatory gleam in her eye, mockingly praising the boy's bravery even as she expects his imminent collapse under the weight of her power. Despite her mockery, the young artist remains focused, his hand steady as he prepares a scroll. Beside him, Arya senses a sudden surge of energy, noting that the magic power has been successfully infused, a fact he confirms with quiet, unwavering certainty. He immediately channels this power into a new creation, manifesting an elixir through his unique drawing ability. This unexpected move catches the antagonist off guard. She watches in disbelief as he utilizes a spent scroll to perform a feat of high-level magic that should be far beyond his capabilities. As the elixir takes effect, a radiant light envelopes the pair, instantly mending their wounds and restoring their depleted magical reserves. Their maximum potential swells with new strength, leaving their adversary to stammer in confusion as she demands to know what he has done. She tries to convince herself that this display is merely a desperate bluff, but the cold intensity in his gaze tells a different story. He challenges her assumption directly, his voice devoid of the fear she expected to find, asking if she truly believed his actions were a mere trick. With his strength renewed, he turns his attention back to the battlefield, declaring the canvas ready for a far more complex refinement. A massive, armored figure wreathed in intense flames begins to coalesce from the air, a fire-advanced golem brought to life by his sheer will. The towering construct lunges forward, its fist a molten hammer aimed directly at the stunned woman. She reels, unable to comprehend how he could fundamentally alter the elemental nature of a golem so effortlessly, while he commands the beast to strike with everything he has. The resulting impact is cataclysmic, sending a shockwave through the area as the golem's fiery fist finds its mark. The force of the blow sends her reeling back, the tide of the battle shifting violently in an instant. His overwhelming strike leaves Koku reeling, unable to comprehend how she was bested. The cliffside erupts in a violent explosion of dust and debris, marking the end of their fierce confrontation as the enemy is swallowed by the blast. Watching the smoke rise from the distant coast, Metis feels a surge of panic. Her companions scramble to react, calling for pigeons to be sent to the Count's army and urging everyone toward the cave in the cliff. Amidst the chaos, her only thought is for the boy's safety as she screams his name into the wind. He lies motionless on the cold ground, his strength completely spent. Arya kneels over him, her voice trembling as she realizes the elixir is gone and his magic has failed entirely. She desperately pleads with him to flee, fearing the enemy's return, but he is far too weak to even lift his head. A gruff voice cuts through the tension as Gohotsu chides the boy for his reckless stubbornness. Despite the bandage across his face and his obvious exhaustion, the young illustrator weakly insists that such concern is unnecessary, though his body betrays his words. He tries to maintain his composure, claiming he isn't being stubborn, but Arya isn't listening. She tearfully points out that he has nothing left to give and desperately calls for help, her eyes widening as she spots reinforcements appearing on the horizon. His gaze shifts, a flicker of recognition and profound relief crossing his face as he looks toward the approaching figures, the weight of the battle finally beginning to lift. Metis leads the charge, her voice echoing across the plateau as she screams for confirmation of their safety. Behind her, a phalanx of armored soldiers and scouts crests the hill, their banners snapping in the wind as they secure the area. The reunion is swift and emotional as the Count arrives, prompting a joyful cry from Arya. While the father embraces his daughter, Metis stands nearby, her sharp eyes fixed on the boy. She demands an explanation for the impossible power he displayed, her suspicion growing alongside her relief. She gently cradles his head in her lap, her earlier authority replaced by a quiet, piercing curiosity. Looking down at his weary face, she asks the question that has been burning in her mind. Who is he, really? Her expression softens into a faint, enigmatic smile as she waits for an answer, the dust of the battle finally settling as she contemplates the mystery of the boy in her arms. She continues to cradle the boy's head, her gaze expectant yet gentle. He flushes deeply, overwhelmed by the proximity and the weight of her question. Finding the truth too complex to explain in this moment, he asks if she can keep a secret. With a soft, reassuring smile, she promises that she will. He raises a single finger, offering a partial truth to satisfy her curiosity. He explains that while he is the heir to a magic store, he possesses no magical ability of his own. She listens intently, her expression unreadable as she processes this humble admission from the one who just displayed such incredible power. She accepts his explanation without further pressure, acknowledging that if this is the identity he chooses to present, she will respect it. A sense of quiet understanding passes between them, though a flicker of doubt remains in his eyes, as if he wonders if he should have said more. Her expression softens even further, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she looks down at him. With sincere gratitude, she whispers a thank you, acknowledging that despite his claims of lacking magic, he was the one who saved her life. She eventually stands, leaning on her staff as the Count's soldiers gather in the distance. The truth of his origins remains a mystery to the world at large, a secret shared only between the two of them amidst the aftermath of the battle. A commander in polished armor rallies his men, his voice booming with the resolve to become a leader worthy of his people's respect. Watching from the sidelines, the young boy reflects on how much he still has to learn about the weight of such responsibility. He then turns his attention to the woman beside him, who speaks with a newfound humility. She confesses that her previous arrogance was a mask, and that meeting him has forced her to realize her own shortcomings despite her extensive studies in swordsmanship, magic, and academia. She acknowledges that true strength lies in knowing oneself, a lesson he helped her learn. As the preparations for departure reach their conclusion, she urges him to join her as soon as he is able, her tone softening with a hint of genuine affection. He offers a determined nod, promising to see her again soon as the soldiers announce that her transport is ready and waiting. The boy stands frozen for a moment, the weight of her parting words echoing in his mind. He whispers the name she just shared, Medi's Fina Mayan, as if trying to grasp the true identity of the person standing before him. She had leaned in close just moments before, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable as she revealed her full, true name. The revelation leaves him stunned, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization about the status she might actually hold. Standing tall against the backdrop of a fading sky, the noblewoman reaffirms her identity, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of the setting sun. She leaves him with a final, lingering promise of a future meeting, addressing him by his full name, Akira Rainford, before turning to depart. He watches the armored carriage pull away, still mulling over the melodic name she left behind. While the surrounding soldiers focus on the logistics of the journey, his thoughts remain fixed on the mysterious woman and the strange, almost feminine ring to her true title, which seems at odds with the stern warrior he first met. Inside the departing carriage, she gazes out at the receding landscape, her thoughts a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She reflects on the irony of finding such a remarkable individual among those she once considered enemies, and a quiet longing takes root in her heart to escape her current life and find a way back to the boy who changed her perspective. Back on the path, a small, knowing smile plays across the boy's lips. The encounter has left a mark on him, a silent acknowledgement of the bond formed and the adventures yet to come. He watches the carriage fade into the distance, a profound sense of respect filling him. For the first time in his life, he feels he has found a true friend. Back at the estate, the Count delivers news of a report from the royal palace. He explains that while Arya was undercover, a body double successfully lured out the rebels, leading to their capture. Addressing her by her true title, the Count informs the princess that preparations are being made for her imminent return to the palace. He bows deeply, begging for her forgiveness and lamenting his own incompetence. He declares that he is no longer fit to be the Count's son, leaving her stunned by the weight of his words. The quiet is shattered as the young boy suddenly collapses, clutching his head and screaming in agony. His companions rush to his side, frantic with worry as he writhes in inexplicable pain. They quickly realize the cause. His mana pathways have become clogged. By channeling power far beyond his natural limits, he has pushed his body into a state of severe mana exhaustion. The situation is dire. His life hangs in the balance. They propose a risky procedure to inject mana directly into his nerves, though it carries the heavy price of potentially stripping him of his ability to use magic forever. Hearing this, he weakly signals his acceptance, willing to pay any price. Later, he rests fitfully in bed while his companion watches over him from the window. She marvels at how a boy from such a remote region could possess such incredible prowess. Yet her thoughts remain troubled by the fate of their departed ally. High above the city, the woman who left earlier gazes down at the rooftops. She is certain now that the boy is the singularity, a focal point for the world's destiny. Her solitude is interrupted by the arrival of the dark-horned woman, who mocks her newfound sentimentality. Undeterred, she issues a cold warning. If any of the shadows dare to touch the child, they will face her wrath. She stares down the looming, multi-eyed shadow, her voice steady as she declares it her enemy. The darkness seems to pulse with a malevolent intent, its numerous eyes fixed upon her as the air grows thick with tension. In response to her defiance, the shadow questions if she is truly willing to go against the end for the sake of the singularity. It challenges her resolve, asking if she understands the weight of her choice. Yet she remains resolute, her expression unyielding even as the weight of the confrontation hangs heavy in the air. Seeing her determination, the dark figure begins to withdraw, offering a final, cryptic farewell and acknowledging her as Manhwa. She stands alone now, the name echoing in the silence as the immediate threat fades into the night, leaving her with the heavy burden of the boy's future and the secrets she keeps. Looking up at the full moon, she wonders how much longer she can maintain this facade. While she has managed to keep things under control for now, the uncertainty of the future and the strain of her hidden power weigh heavily on her mind. A few days later, the young boy finally regains enough strength to seek her out, his mind plagued by the hazy memory of a shadow in the moonlight. He returns to the place where they last met, his heart filled with unease, only to find the area deserted and his mentor nowhere to be found. He watched as the days turned into weeks and then years, the memory of that entire encounter beginning to feel like nothing more than a mirage. Though he waited day after day, she never showed up again, and the peaceful life of his boyhood slowly gave way to the relentless passage of time. Medi stands with a grave expression, her voice steady as she reports the ominous signs of odor activity detected near the northern cliff. To safeguard the life of Queen Kaisera Lando Stromheim, the guards of the heir to the throne are scouring the land for the most capable magicians to prepare for the looming catastrophe. She emphasizes the urgency, requesting that her mentor, Kadia Mayan, be found and brought in for support, noting his unparalleled mastery of summoning magic. The history of this threat dates back to the year 698 in the northern reaches of the Stromheim Kingdom, in the world of Alterad. where a massive horde of odors suddenly emerged, overwhelming the local defenses. They would drain the very life from living creatures, and the fallen were soon resurrected as new odors, allowing their numbers to swell into the tens of thousands and seize half the kingdom within a mere fortnight. As fear gripped the hearts of all living things, it became clear that only the most formidable magicians possessed the power to stand against this wave of absolute destruction. Among those who rose to the challenge was the Pennsylvanian Magic Squad, a specialized unit that included powerful summoning magicians who even brought their own summons to the fray. The ground erupts in a violent explosion of dust and debris as the magical forces collide in a desperate struggle for survival. They were eventually subjugated, bringing the long war to a close, but the victory was bittersweet. The conflict claimed the lives of the legendary hero Sword Mayan and Queen Celeria, the second ruler of the Stromheim kingdom, who fell while holding back thousands of the monsters. Following that devastating conflict, humanity took drastic measures to ensure their survival. A colossal wall was constructed in the northern reaches of the kingdom, and global alliances were formed to stand united against any future threats. Following these monumental shifts, Queen Kaiserlando Stromheim ascended to the throne and inherited the title of hero. She chose to abandon the nation's identity as a land of warriors, pivoting the kingdom's focus toward the rigorous training of sorcerers and summoning magicians. 14 years have slipped by since that era of strife. It is now the year 712 of the Altirad calendar, and the kingdom of Stromheim enjoys a period of unprecedented stability and growth. Within the city walls, the people live in a state of hard-won peace. The streets are filled with the sounds of daily life and laughter, as the citizens believe the goddess's wrath has finally passed, leaving them to prosper in the sunlight. Amidst the bustling cityscape, a local tavern stands as a familiar landmark for those seeking a moment of respite. Inside the warm, noisy establishment, a blonde waitress moves quickly between tables, serving mugs of white beer to the patrons. At one table, a man named Gohotsu expresses his gratitude to his young companion, Akira, though he notes that simply settling his debts would have sufficed. He looks down, his face etched with a mix of exhaustion and lingering frustration. Gohotsu remarks that he has a habit of getting fixated on the most unusual details, suggesting that such intensity is simply a core part of his character. The man, Gohotsu, admits that he allowed himself to get carried away, losing a significant sum of money. He reacts with shock upon learning the extent of his friend's own losses, while the boy counters that he couldn't simply ignore a desperate plea for help, even for a small amount of gold. This admission of further waste pushes the boy to his limit, and he lunges forward to grab his friend by the shirt. He shouts in anger, demanding to know if his money is being treated as a bottomless resource, while the man stammers out a desperate apology, claiming he only wanted to win back what was lost. He stares blankly, the weight of the 9,000 gold debt pressing down on him like a physical burden. It is a staggering sum, equivalent to half a year's earnings for an entire shop, and the realization of his misfortune leaves him sweating and speechless. Beside him, his companion laments their shared lack of talent and luck, noting that as the sons of a knight and a merchant, they seem destined for struggle. The young man can only brood over the sheer scale of his loss, wondering how he could have been so reckless. As the conversation continues, he reflects on his family's prestige, with siblings serving as knights on the Great Northern Wall, while he remains the magicless son of a shop owner. His friend asks if the weight of expectation from such a lineage is difficult to bear, wondering if he would have preferred being born into a simple rural family instead. The man goes on to mention the tragic incident from his childhood, the moment he supposedly lost the ability to wield magic entirely, a fact that seems to define his current struggle. He offers a small, weary smile in response, claiming the loss doesn't bother him, though his friend remains apologetic. The older man suggests that their situations are different, as the boy once possessed a spark of talent that has since been extinguished. Turning back to his drink, he admits that he was never truly powerful to begin with, having always relied on magical scrolls rather than innate ability. His companion shifts the topic to the mundane comforts of his own life, mentioning his lack of concern for marriage or financial security as a second-generation worker. Their somber atmosphere is suddenly shattered by the tavern's waitress, who leans over their table with a disapproving look. She chides them for their youthful pessimism, insisting that they are far too young to be talking about life so hopelessly, and offers a special serving of sausages to lift their spirits. She continues her motherly scolding, explaining that she understands their plight because she was born into poverty in Lloyd herself. To her, listening to the grievances of young men is simply part of her duty as an elder in this bustling establishment, and she encourages them to dream a bit more. Seeing his flustered reaction, she leans in closer and asks if he has a wife, boldly suggesting they go on a date once her shift concludes. He recoils in shock, his face turning a deep shade of crimson as he stammeringly declines the unexpected invitation, much to her amusement. This rejection leaves his friend utterly baffled, unable to comprehend why anyone would turn down such a charming offer from the tavern's favorite server. While the young man hides his face in embarrassment, a nearby patron cries out in jealousy, declaring the waitress to be the absolute best, and wondering why he wasn't the one chosen for such an honor. He sits at the tavern table, enduring the relentless teasing of his companion. Gohotsu laughs, suggesting that Akira's lack of attention to the waitress was just a clumsy attempt at building a relationship, much to the boy's annoyance. The banter continues as the older man jokingly asks if they are playing for the same team, prompting a sharp retort from the youth. He is far more concerned with the state of his finances than any romantic entanglements, especially when his companion seems more interested in joking than paying up. Their bickering is suddenly cut short by the arrival of two familiar figures at the tavern entrance. Medi stands tall and composed, her presence immediately commanding the room as she calls out to the young man, accompanied by a quiet and observant Arya. Looming over the table with an air of aristocratic authority, the dark-haired woman questions why he hasn't mentioned having a noble elf as a personal maid. The suggestion sends the tavern into a hushed shock, while the boy frantically tries to deny the scandalous implication, much to the amusement of those watching. She ignores his protests, delivering the news that a guest from the royal palace is waiting for him. The revelation leaves him reeling, his mind racing as he considers the implications of such a visit and the secret he shares with the girl who has served as his maid and confidant since they were children. A painful memory flickers through his mind, recalling the day 8 years ago when his life changed forever. After being kidnapped for a dark ritual, the mana nerves within his body were severed, leaving him unable to harness magical energy on his own, a burden he has carried in silence ever since. As they walk through the city streets, he reflects on his current state, convincing himself that a simple peasant's life requires no great magical talent. He knows that as long as he possesses a scroll and can draw upon the mana of others, he can still manifest his unique drawing magic, a secret known only to his closest companion. The group soon finds themselves navigating a bustling area known as a popular dating spot, surrounded by couples. The romantic atmosphere is stifling for the young man, who finds himself blushing furiously as he struggles to push intrusive thoughts about a certain oath out of his mind. He glances at the silver-haired girl walking beside him, firmly reminding himself that she is family and nothing more. Despite his internal resolve, the sudden intensity of her gaze and the weight of their shared history make it difficult to maintain his usual composure. She breaks the silence with a soft word of gratitude, thanking him for always listening to her. He looks at her, truly seeing the unwavering support she has provided through his darkest times, and simply acknowledges that she is, and always will be, the person he relies on most. He often finds himself drifting back to memories of a life that could have been, imagining a mother who greets him with a warm smile and his favorite meal, regardless of his perceived failures or lack of status. He envisions a father who offers quiet encouragement, urging him to study the ancient scrolls despite his lack of magical talent. Yet the reality of his current isolation weighs heavily on him. The phantom warmth of a family dinner feels forever out of reach, a stark contrast to the cold, lonely path he now walks in this world. He yearns for a place of true belonging, a life free from the relentless cycle of pain and hardship, where he can simply exist as himself. This fleeting moment of internal hope is shattered by a sharp, unfamiliar voice cutting through the air, demanding to know if he is indeed Akira Rainford. The speaker is a stern woman clad in practical travel armor, her hand resting authoritatively on her hip as she stares him down with an intense gaze. She repeats her inquiry with cold precision, seeking confirmation that the boy before her is the legendary genius of summoning magic. Akira's eyes widen in disbelief as the weight of the woman's words sinks in. The revelation that she knows of his hidden potential as a genius summoner sends a jolt of shock through him, leaving him to wonder how his secret could have been uncovered so easily. He studies her face intently, a nagging sense of familiarity tugging at his memory as he tries to place where they might have met. He questions if she has come from the royal palace, certain that her refined presence is one he has encountered somewhere before. Sensing his confusion, she offers a polite apology for the abrupt summons, explaining that she had her maid bring him to her as quickly as possible. She then looks him directly in the eye, seeking confirmation that he is indeed the one known as Akira Rainford. As he remains silent, her expression hardens into one of stern resolve. She notes that based on the reports she has received, simple words will not be sufficient to bridge the gap between them, her gaze intensifying as she prepares to prove her point through action. Suddenly, a memory flashes through his mind, vivid and sharp. He recalls a technique that flowed with the grace of water and the piercing speed of a ray of light, the complete form of a style he had seen once before, now being mirrored perfectly by the woman in front of him. She begins to demonstrate the prowess of her lineage, explaining the secret sword technique of the Man family. With a single, fluid motion, she can unleash a barrage of countless slashes, directing the lethal energy with absolute precision in any direction she chooses. Standing with an air of undeniable authority, she finally reveals her true identity. She is Katia Mayan, the commander of the Royal Knights, the celebrated sword saint, and the second daughter of the prestigious Man family. The realization hits him like a physical blow as he connects her to his past. He remembers Medi's mentioning her instructor, but the image he had formed was of an elderly woman, not this formidable knight. He struggles to reconcile the old lady from the stories with the powerful commander who now stands before him, realizing they haven't seen each other since an incident 8 years ago. He questions the reason for this meeting, wondering if it was an order from Medi's. Katia remains silent for a moment, her expression unreadable as she prepares to depart if he has nothing more to say. Because of his inquiry, she confirms that it was indeed Medi's who sent her, her eyes narrowing slightly as she speaks. This revelation causes his heart to skip a beat, especially when she mentions a special memory he supposedly shares with her mentor. The young man's fist clenches at his side as he recalls a promise of secrecy. He had been under the impression that Medi's viewed his unique ability as nothing more than a standard summoning technique. He begins to sweat, the weight of the situation pressing down on him as he realizes she has known the truth about his powers all along. Arya's warnings about his normal life being destroyed echo in his mind, but the commander quickly assures him that she has no intention of making threats, despite the gravity of what she knows. With the tension slightly eased, she asks if he can spare a little bit of his time for a more private conversation. Moments later, they find themselves at a quaint cake shop, where she casually orders sweets and herbal tea while he sits stiffly, wondering what she could possibly want to discuss in such a public yet intimate setting. The proximity and her striking appearance cause a flush to creep up his neck, his heart racing as he struggles to maintain his composure. While she admires the lovely atmosphere of the shop, he feels as though he is being interrogated, the pleasant surroundings doing little to mask his underlying anxiety. In an attempt to break the ice, he decides to offer a compliment, noting how pretty she is, but she counters by observing that he looks familiar, asking if they have met somewhere before, a question that sends a fresh wave of panic through him. He sits across from her, feeling the weight of her playful gaze as she suggests he should be practicing his charms on someone his own age. She seems pleased with herself, noting that her approach is yielding better results than she had anticipated, while he struggles to maintain his composure under her teasing. She continues, pointing out that since he is only 15, she must seem closer in age to his parents than appear. He looks at her, surprised by the revelation of her age, as she admits that despite her youthful appearance, she is 24 years old. Her words cause his eyes to widen in a sudden, sharp realization. He suddenly bolts upright, his hands slamming onto the table with enough force to rattle the tea set. The thought of this legendary sword saint and high-ranking aristocrat being a potential mother candidate sends his mind racing with impossible implications. She recoils in shock, her face flushing a deep crimson as she frantically clarifies that she is neither married nor a mother. In fact, she admits with a mix of embarrassment and defensiveness that she hasn't even been in a relationship in all her 24 years, prompting him to stammer out a hasty apology for the misunderstanding. He settles back down, his face still warm from the awkward exchange, and wonders silently if there are other women in this world who could fit the criteria of a mother candidate besides his own. She, meanwhile, takes a bite of her cake, her expression softening into one of quiet contemplation. A strange thought crosses her mind. If her life had taken a different path, perhaps she truly could have been his mother. He remains lost in thought, sweat beading on his forehead as he reasons that if she were truly his mother, she wouldn't be the type of person to pose a threat to him. He eventually shakes off the bizarre tangent, leaning forward with a renewed sense of purpose to ask her directly for the true reason behind her visit. She meets his gaze with a newfound gravity, acknowledging that their conversation has meandered long enough. With a serious expression, she prepares to speak her mind clearly and without further distraction. Katia leans forward, her hand outstretched across the table in a gesture of both invitation and demand. She reveals the true reason for her visit. She wants him to join her elite party for a mission of immense danger, the subjugation of a flame dragon. She emphasizes that his unique summoning abilities are the key to their success. He stares back at her, his expression a mixture of shock and intense realization as the magnitude of the request sinks in. Akira is stunned as the commander of the Royal Knights presents him with an impossible request to join her party and face a flame dragon. He realizes with a jolt that she is somehow aware of his hidden summoning abilities, a secret he believed was well guarded from the world. He quickly tries to deflect her interest, explaining that a childhood incident left his magic nerves damaged beyond repair. He insists that he is now completely incapable of wielding magic, his voice tinged with a practiced, humble regret as he tries to maintain his cover. Continuing his facade, he argues that without the aid of a scroll, even the most basic spells are beyond him, making him a liability rather than an asset against such a formidable beast. He looks away, hoping his excuses will be enough to convince her of his uselessness. She remains silent for a moment, her gaze narrowing as she scrutinizes his every word, searching for the truth she knows is hidden behind his humble exterior. In her mind, she sees through the deception, recognizing him as a genius who deliberately obscures his true potential to avoid the spotlight. She knows his character well, understanding that despite his claims of weakness, he would sacrifice everything to protect those he cares about. Breaking the silence, she counters his excuses by promising to provide the necessary mana herself, mentioning that her party already includes a prodigy sorcerer from Pennsylvania to assist in the mission. The commander clarifies her objective, explaining that they specifically need his skills as a golem summoner to serve as a shield against the dragon's onslaught. When he still hesitates, she shifts her tactics, mentioning a substantial reward for his cooperation that catches his attention. She names the price, 10,000 gold pieces. The sheer magnitude of the sum leaves him breathless, his mind racing as he calculates how easily such a fortune could wipe away his mounting debts. Under the weight of her intense gaze and the lure of financial freedom, he finally finds himself unable to refuse the call to adventure. He recoils, his face flushed with a mix of indignation and panic as he reminds the commander of her promise not to use threats. Katia, however, remains unfazed, sipping her drink while calmly pointing out that her duty as a knight commander requires her to investigate why a talent as valuable as his was hidden from the kingdom. She even hints at questioning his parents about his magic, leaving him with no room to maneuver. Cornered by her logic and the looming threat of his family being involved, he finally relents, formally accepting the request. He acknowledges that he has no real choice but to comply and keep the arrangement a secret. His internal monologue confirms his suspicion. This woman is far more cunning than she appears. The deal is struck. He will summon a golem using the mana provided to him. Her demeanor shifts instantly to one of cheerful gratitude, though the underlying edge remains as she jokingly remarks that she would have felt bad sending such a good person to prison. They agree to depart the following morning, though he adamantly refuses her offer to pick him up at his home, opting instead to meet at the inn. As he prepares for the journey, his thoughts turn to the unknown members of the party tasked with subjugating the flame dragon. He prays for a kind companion, feeling a sense of total defeat at how easily Katia manipulated him with a perfect balance of pressure and charm. He knows that if he cannot overcome this crisis, his debts will be the least of his worries. Upon meeting the first of his new allies, he is immediately met with harsh skepticism. The young sorcerer, Pearl Bryce, looks him over with blatant disdain, questioning how someone who looks so unremarkable could possibly be a genius summoner, if he can't even perform a summons without an external mana supply. He is taken aback by the girl's abrasive personality, realizing that she might be even more difficult to deal with than Katia. The prodigy from Pennsylvania clearly has no respect for him, openly mocking the idea that an incompetent boy like him could be of any use. Katia steps in to defend his reputation, revealing that despite losing his magic in a past incident, he had successfully contracted an advanced golem at the tender age of 7. This revelation leaves Pearl stunned and incredulous, unable to believe such a feat was possible for a child. Deciding to see for herself, the young sorcerer prepares to initiate a mana transfer, though she does so with a lingering sense of suspicion. He, meanwhile, can only sigh in frustration, wondering why every woman he meets seems intent on treating him like a child. As the transfer begins, he focuses his intent, drawing forth the energy to manifest a familiar. A stone sentinel slowly rumbles into existence, but its appearance is underwhelming. Pearl immediately scoffs, labeling it a mere low-level golem that hardly justifies the effort. However, her dismissive attitude quickly turns to alarm as she feels her mana being violently siphoned away. She stammers in confusion, realizing that a simple, low-level summon should never require such a massive amount of energy, leaving her pale and trembling as the true nature of his power begins to surface. She reels back in sheer disbelief, her mind racing as she examines the boy's internal state. His magic nerves are a chaotic mess, frayed and broken beyond anything she has ever seen. The mana she is pouring into him isn't even settling in his mana pool, leaving her to wonder what horrific incident could have left a person in such a state. Turning to her companion, the young sorcerer explains the dire situation. The boy simply cannot use magic because any mana transferred to him bypasses his internal storage entirely. Instead of filling his pool, the energy is being sucked directly into the golem he has summoned, creating a bottomless pit of consumption. To understand the gravity of the situation, one must understand that every magic user possesses a mana pool, a vital reservoir where energy is stored before it can be shaped into spells. Under normal circumstances, mana transfer involves sending energy from one person's pool to another's. This injected magic should travel through the receiver's magic nerves before being cast, with the potency of the spell usually limited by the capacity of their mana pool. However, the prodigy realizes with growing dread that the boy's nerves are so severely damaged that they cannot hold the charge. Even though the mana isn't his own, it should still be able to sit within his reservoir, but the frayed pathways make that impossible. He stands there silently, unaware of the harsh assessment being made of his condition. To the sorcerer, he appears as nothing more than a leaky vessel, a useless void where any mana pumped into him is instantly lost, resulting in a staggering waste of precious magical energy. The Knight Commander watches the exchange, the weight of the revelation finally sinking in. She realizes that the boy's claims about his damaged nerves were not an exaggeration, while the young sorcerer continues to mutter about the sheer impossibility of a low-level golem requiring more mana than an advanced summon. Breaking the tense silence, the commander looks down at the exhausted girl and asks the question that matters most. Is there any way to cure the boy's magic nerves? She continues to press, reminding the young prodigy of her prestigious background from the magic nation of Pennsylvania. Even if such a feat is impossible for ordinary sorcerers, she believes a genius of her caliber might be the only one capable of such a miracle. Looking up with a newfound spark of determination, the sorcerer admits that while the task is daunting, she believes they can find a way to mend what has been broken. She sits calmly on the ground, her presence a stark contrast to the internal turmoil gripping Akira. He is reeling from the revelation, his mind racing as he reflects on the peaceful life he led under the guise of being unable to use magic. The sudden shift in the atmosphere is palpable. He never imagined that this young girl, despite her reputation, would actually possess the means to repair his shattered magic nerve. The young sorcerer clutched her head in despair, her voice cracking as she wailed that the task before them was simply impossible. As the group continued their journey through the sun-dappled woods, the conversation turned to the complexities of treating mana disorders. Katia pointed out the severe lack of proper resources, while Akira listened intently to the grim reality of their situation. He looked down at the girl, his expression softening as he explained that while he couldn't defeat the fire dragon yet, there was hope for a cure in Pennsylvania. However, the staggering cost of 100,000 gold made such a remedy feel like a distant dream. She interjected, reminding the young sorcerer that summoners were of immense value to the kingdom, even as the girl stubbornly insisted that Akira was nothing more than an incompetent amateur. The commander stood her ground, arguing that summoning an advanced golem was a feat that could provide a vital shield against the dragon's flames. Despite her initial protests, the young prodigy eventually relented, agreeing to share her own mana with him if necessary, leading the commander to declare the matter settled. Moments later, she presented a gift to the young man, much to the shock of the sorcerer, who felt such a high-class item was wasted on him. The commander clarified that the true purpose of their mission was to test both the ability and the character of the one they had recruited. He marveled at the garment, noting its resemblance to modern clothing and its intricate design, which was characteristic of the royal knight's finest gear. It was a specialized robe, preloaded with healing and protection spells, though the sheer cost of such a tool weighed heavily on his mind. The knight explained that the gift was a gesture of sincerity from Medisfinasoma, a name that caused the young man to pause as he finally learned the full identity of his mentor. He feels the weight of their expectations, a mix of contempt and hope that feels like throwing pearls before swine. Despite his novice status, the promise of 10,000 gold is a staggering sum he can hardly believe, making the risks of the mission seem almost secondary to the reward. Encouraged by his resolve, the knight commander cheers them on, while the young sorcerer pledges to give her absolute best to the mission ahead, her eyes bright with determination. With their spirits high, the trio ventures forth into the unknown, the commander's voice ringing out with the promise of the adventure that awaits them as they leave the safety of the city behind. The calm of the journey is shattered by a sudden confrontation, where the young prodigy unleashes a devastating storm of thunderbolts. Beside her, the master swordsman strikes with electrified precision, her blade a blur of kinetic energy against the roaring beast. A blinding magical flash consumes the area as they make short work of their monstrous foes, including a basilisk and a ferocious lizard. Their combined strength is undeniable, a master of the blade and a prodigy of the royal court working in perfect, lethal harmony. As the sorcerer uses her detection skills to scout the path ahead, the young man watches them, wondering why such powerful warriors would even need his assistance. The scene then shifts to the quiet of the night, where the steam of a natural hot spring rises into the air. Seeking refuge from the day's grueling battles, the two women soak in the warm, restorative waters under a starlit sky, letting the heat wash away their fatigue. Nearby, he keeps his distance, flustered and apologetic as he tries to respect their privacy, while the commander playfully teases him. The conversation turns to the necessity of healing, with the group debating the use of precious magic versus simple medicinal herbs for minor injuries. He reveals a hidden cache of scrolls and a personal remedy he has relied on since his youth, a secret he has kept even from those closest to him. His unique ability to manifest items from drawings provides a resource more valuable than any standard recovery spell. This reliance on external items stems from a grim reality once explained by his mentor. His body is incapable of producing its own mana. To survive, he must receive energy from others, for attempting to summon power from his own empty pool would lead to a fatal state of exhaustion. He sat under the moonlight, the weight of his deception heavy on his heart. He had told Arya this was a simple delivery, hiding the lethal reality of the subjugation mission. The guilt of repeatedly lying to the woman who cared for him so deeply gnawed at his conscience. Seeking a moment of respite, he emerged from a scroll near the hot spring, startling the young sorceress. She questioned his sudden appearance, but he explained he was merely using a healing scroll to tend to his injured knee, earning a playful scolding for his recklessness. As she settled back into the water, she noticed a strange phenomenon. The liquid changed color at her touch. It wasn't a mundane spring, but a magical one, reacting to the presence of those within it. The girls marveled at the warmth, noting how the magical waters were actively restoring their mana reserves. Kadia observed that the water surrounding both her and Prol was shimmering with a brilliant gold light, a testament to their immense magical potential, though she teased that such a high amount of mana felt almost like cheating. Their conversation was interrupted when the knight commander finally noticed him standing there. She reacted with shock and indignation, calling him an incompetent brat, while he defensively explained that his total exhaustion had driven him to seek the spring's restorative powers. Watching the exchange, she wondered silently if the magical properties of the spring might actually improve his poor mana circulation, hoping that even a small effect would be worth the effort. He felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him as he thanked them, his face flushing. Kadia, still annoyed but relenting, ordered him to stay strictly in his own corner of the pool if he was going to join them. Finally sinking into the water, he let out a sigh of pure relief, the heat soothing his aching muscles. The young sorceress watched him closely, noting the physical toll his training had clearly taken on his body. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as the water surrounding him began to pulse with a vibrant, multicolored rainbow glow. The sight left the others speechless with shock, while he looked down in terror, wondering what was happening to his mana. The trio stands amidst the swirling mists of the magical spring, the water beneath them erupting in a brilliant, impossible rainbow glow. Kadia, her eyes wide with disbelief, demands to know his true identity, her voice trembling as she questions why the spring has reacted with such an unprecedented display of color. She continues to stare at the shimmering water, realizing that the sheer volume of mana being detected is far beyond anything she could have imagined. While Prol begins to grasp the magnitude of his hidden potential, he himself is gripped by a sudden, cold dread, fearing that this anomaly signifies something fundamentally wrong with his own physical form. As the young sorceress playfully splashes in the vibrant pool, she admits that even with her extensive knowledge, this phenomenon is a first for her. The group reflects on the established laws of the spring, where mana levels are typically categorized by a strict hierarchy of green, blue, red, and gold. Because the rainbow hue exists outside of these known reactions, Kadia finds herself at a loss, unable to determine if his power is truly divine or simply a bizarre malfunction of the spring itself. He stands awkwardly in the water, his expression a mix of sheepishness and internal calculation as Katia rants about the rainbow color's absence from every known magic grimoire. Though she mockingly labels him as immeasurably incompetent, he finds a small measure of relief in her dismissal, hoping that his true capabilities remain safely obscured by her confusion. Later that night, under the pale light of a full moon, the two women sit in contemplative silence. Katia's mind continues to race, wondering if the man they travel with is some form of high-level demon in disguise or truly just an enigma of incompetence. By the flickering warmth of the campfire, she rests her head on her knees, the chill of the night air prompting a brief exchange with the young sorceress. Prol offers to take over the watch, noting that since she has already woken up, she might as well stay on the lookout while the others rest. As the first light of dawn begins to break, they stand together with steaming cups in hand, watching their companions sleep soundly nearby. Prol grumbles about his lack of consideration for their rest, while Katia can only sigh, calling him a foolish man for his oblivious nature. He rests quietly by the fire, oblivious to the conversation nearby. Katia gently chides Prol for being too hard on him, reminding her that this is his first time out on a subjugation quest, and that he is still adjusting to the rigors of travel. Because of her protective stance, Prol presses for answers, curious why Katia is so invested in a boy from Stromheim, a place known for having very few summoners. She finds the commander's interest in such an unremarkable youth to be suspicious. As he sleeps, Prol voices her skepticism, questioning how someone with a mana disorder could possibly maintain a contract with an advanced golem. To her, the math simply doesn't add up, and she suspects there is something fundamentally wrong with the situation. A knowing smile plays across Katia's lips as she listens to the young sorcerer's doubts, her expression suggesting she holds a piece of the puzzle that Prol has yet to discover. She then drops a name that changes everything: Carl Rainford. Prol's eyes widen in shock as Katia reveals that her investigation into the boy's lineage led her to a startling conclusion about his father, a man whose reputation precedes him. The weight of that name hangs in the air. Carl Rainford was the greatest genius mage in history, a man whispered to be the second coming of the evil god. Prol can hardly believe that the seemingly incompetent boy before them is the son of such a legendary and feared figure. She continues, theorizing that the hero suddenly vanished from Pennsylvania 18 years ago to retire in Stromheim and raise his son in peace, despite the heavy criticism he faced for abandoning the war effort. While the idea of a 7-year-old forming a contract with an advanced golem is normally an absurd impossibility, Katia argues that if the child is a Rainford, the impossible becomes plausible, as the bloodline itself defies standard magical logic. The young man continues his chores by the fire, unaware that his companions have linked him to the genius who revolutionized Pennsylvania's magical technology. Prol watches him with new eyes, finally beginning to accept that his lineage might explain his extraordinary circumstances. With the mystery of his heritage laid bare, Katia vows to keep a closer eye on him, while Prol reflects on her own initial impressions. She recalls the strange sense of closeness and familiarity she felt when they first met, a feeling she can't quite explain even now. The flame dragon lets out a deafening roar, its massive jaws agape as it looms over the battlefield, radiating an aura of pure destruction. She finishes the intricate summoning circle, the lines glowing with power as the drawing is completed. Beside her, Katia notes that they have finally found their target after a long day's search. Despite the exhaustion, the young sorcerer successfully calls forth the advanced golem, a towering construct of stone and magic that stands ready to face the beast. Looking up at their creation, she marvels at its sheer scale, her eyes wide with excitement at the sight of the massive entity. Katia confirms it is indeed an advanced model, though she wonders how a 7-year-old could have possibly forged such a contract. Meanwhile, Akira stands ready, though he admits he doesn't fully grasp the situation. Katia urges them to move quickly, as her mana is being drained at an alarming rate by the golem's presence. As the battle intensifies, the flame dragon's movements begin to sluggishly falter under the pressure. Katia commands Akira to keep the beast's attention, but he struggles to maneuver the massive golem with his limited mana reserves. He desperately tries to increase his efficiency, even as the dragon prepares to unleash its fiery breath upon them. A powerful blow from the golem connects, sending a shockwave through the air as it strikes the dragon. Katia praises the successful strike, but warns that they must maintain the pressure. She feels her energy slipping away, a sentiment echoed by the young sorcerer, who is stunned by the sheer amount of mana required to sustain the summon in this desperate situation. He pushes his body to the limit, focusing every ounce of his will on repairing his severed magic nerves to boost efficiency. He knows he is running out of time and mana, but he refuses to let the golem fail. Katia watches him with concern, realizing that their window of opportunity is closing fast as the dragon begins to recover. With a surge of desperate power, she activates her ultimate technique, her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. She moves with impossible speed, 30 times faster than before, as she prepares to deliver a finishing blow. The air crackles with the force of her magical flash as she charges toward the dragon. The concept of the hero is an ancient one, an incarnation of warborn from a mutation created by a forgotten god. 7 noble families, Baldado, Giliusidin, Naga, Mayan, Lepaden, Freed, and Lion, stand as the world's protectors. Among them, the Mayan family is the sole guardian of the magical flash sword technique and the bearer of the crimson bloody finds mark. The swordmaster's speed is legendary, capable of delivering 100 slashes in a single second, a feat said to transcend the speed of light itself. Her eye glows with a crimson light, the mark of the blood berserker. This is the true power of a hero, a force capable of felling even a massive flame dragon with a single swing, a power well known throughout the world. She looks down, her expression unreadable as she processes the events that just unfolded. Turning to the young summoner, she admits her previous skepticism. Seeing him successfully form a contract with an advanced golem has finally erased her doubts about his capabilities, though the shock of it remains. Nearby, the young sorceress lies sprawled on the ground, completely drained of energy. He quickly points out that the feat was only possible because of her immense mana supply, though the Knight Commander remains stunned by how quickly such a complex contract was established, noting that even with mana, it shouldn't be possible so fast. She explains the gravity of the situation, noting that forming a bond with high-level entities is an exceedingly rare occurrence. Typically, such power is either inherited from a predecessor or requires the creature to be forcibly subjugated until it kneels before the sorcerer. The realization of his age hits her with full force. The fact that he achieved such a feat at a mere 7 years old is unheard of in the annals of history, leaving her completely baffled. Her voice sharpens as she demands an explanation. She questions why he would hide such world-shaking talent and wonders if his father was the one who commanded this secrecy, leaving the boy visibly distressed. He stands frozen as the weight of the situation crashes down upon him. The realization that the entire subjugation request was a calculated ruse to expose his hidden abilities leaves him reeling. He wonders why Medes would suggest he become a state summoner and how his father could be involved in such a scheme. His confusion only deepens as the Knight Commander raises her voice, her expression intense. She dismisses his attempts to change the subject, declaring with absolute certainty that everything unfolding is merely a component of Carl Rainford's grand design. The young man can only stare in stunned silence as she continues her interrogation. She posits that his father deliberately suppressed his son's immense talent, all to cultivate him into a genius mage away from prying eyes. He tries to protest, sweat beading on his brow as he insists that his father is nothing more than a simple shop owner. However, his denials fall on deaf ears, as she accuses him of lying and claims he can no longer maintain the deception. As Prole watches the exchange, the commander lays out her logic. She explains that while she initially doubted the rumors, the reality of a 7-year-old child forming a contract with a high-level entity is a feat so impossible it defies conventional magical laws. She leans in, her gaze piercing as she concludes that someone of extraordinary power must have facilitated the contract. Her prime suspect is none other than the man she considers the greatest genius mage in the history of the Magic Academy, Carl Rainford. Overwhelmed by the absurdity of the claims, he shouts for her to stop, his mind racing to reconcile the legendary figure she describes with the father he knows. He has never heard of these accolades, and the idea that his father is a world-renowned mage seems like a fever dream. He eventually falls silent, looking away as he grapples with the possibility that his entire life has been built on a foundation of secrets. The commander offers a stiff apology, explaining that the request was a necessary trial to confirm the extent of his powers, though she remains unapologetic about the deception. She reveals that this entire operation was orchestrated at the behest of Medes, who holds him in high regard. The young man remains lost in thought, the names and legacies of his parents suddenly feeling like heavy burdens he never asked to carry. Suddenly, the ground beneath them begins to tremble violently, cutting the conversation short. As the group braces themselves against the tremors, Prole wonders aloud if the volcanic activity in the region has finally reached a breaking point. Katia stares in disbelief as the massive eye of the flame dragon looms behind her. She had been certain the beast was defeated, yet here it stands, its presence a suffocating weight that chills her to the bone. Her eyes widen in a moment of chilling realization. This isn't merely a nest. Beside her, Akira's voice is a sharp whisper, warning that they must not provoke the creature under any circumstances, a sentiment she grimly echoes as the gravity of their situation sinks in. They are far outmatched, and any wrong move could be their last. The creature's massive, obsidian claws scrape against the stone, each movement punctuated by the flicker of embers and the low, guttural rumble of a predator at rest. As the dust settles, the true scale of the horror is revealed. They haven't stumbled into a simple lair, but the sacred den of a divine beast, a creature of mythic power that dwarfs the surrounding ruins and the tiny figures of the group below. The world is governed by 4 primordial forces, each embodied by a divine beast. There is Gnome, the titan of earth, Leviathan, the serpent of the depths, and Elfin, the ethereal spirit of the winds. But above them all reigns the most fearsome of their kind, Salamander, the divine beast of fire. As the group stares up at the towering creature, the sheer weight of its presence becomes suffocating. It is not merely a monster, but a being once worshipped as a god, a pinnacle of living existence that no ordinary hero could hope to face head-on. Faced with such overwhelming power, Katia's voice trembles as she suggests a desperate retreat, urging the others to move with extreme caution to avoid drawing the beast's ire. He can feel the heat radiating from the beast, his mind racing through the terrifying statistics of its power. The creature's breath alone exceeds 3,000 degrees, capable of incinerating everything within a 100-meter radius in a single instant. In a frantic attempt to find a solution, Katia turns to Prole, hoping the young mage might have some ice-based magic to counter the flames. However, Prole admits with a sheepish look that she lacks any aptitude for ice magic, leaving the group in a state of mounting panic as their options dwindle. She further explains that even if she were proficient in ice magic, it would likely be futile against a being of this magnitude. To stand a chance, they would need the support of the other divine beasts, like Elfin or Leviathan, but such entities do not form contracts with mere humans. Akira is left questioning the nature of Leviathan, wondering how such a creature could be summoned by a human. As they weigh the impossible choice between a suicidal charge and a risky retreat, Pearl's thoughts drift back to the leader of the evil cult they once faced, wondering if she too had transcended humanity. Akira warns that any sudden movement could trigger an immediate, lethal response from the beast watching them. Despite their attempts to back away slowly, the beast's patience evaporates. With a deafening roar, a torrent of fire erupts, engulfing the area in a blinding, searing explosion that defies all their preparations. He stares in disbelief as the small girl stands her ground, her barrier absorbing the brunt of the devastating heat. Beside him, Katia cries out in alarm, fearing the child has already pushed her mana reserves beyond their limit. Ignoring the protests, the diminutive mage commands Katia to take him and flee, insisting she will face the divine beast alone. He snarls in frustration, calling her a fool and demanding she summon her golem instead of throwing her life away. But she counters by offering to transfer her remaining energy directly to him. He argues that such a reckless transfer will leave her empty and vulnerable, yet she silences him with a sharp command to be quiet. She is resolute in her plan to act as a diversion, leaving him to realize with a heavy heart that he cannot allow Katia to be the one sacrificed. With a grim set to her jaw, she draws her blade, preparing to lead the golem into the fray to seize the beast's attention. He watches, teeth grit in a mixture of anger and helplessness as the plan is set in motion. Suddenly, a massive, multi-limbed stone construct rumbles into existence, towering over the battlefield as a testament to her hidden strength. Despite the strain, she manages to maintain the golem, the protective barrier, and a delicate mana restoration spell all at once, earning a rare word of praise even as she dismisses his earlier insults. He stands frozen, his mind racing to process the sheer scale of the power being displayed by someone he had consistently underestimated. The intensity of her focus is palpable as she weaves a fourth complex enchantment, Karadia Dawn Burst, while simultaneously stabilizing his damaged mana nerves. He finally recognizes the true nature of her genius, realizing she is performing feats of magic that should be impossible for a single caster. As the incantation concludes, the very atmosphere shifts, clearing the oppressive heat and making it easier for him to breathe and move. Katia watches in awe, her hope renewed as the tide of the battle begins to turn under the weight of this unexpected miracle. She explains that by optimizing his mana efficiency, she can keep the golem active long enough for them to find an opening to escape the inferno. Closing her eyes, she reaches into the deepest recesses of her spirit, grasping every strand of his mana nerves to forge a perfect connection. She plunges deeper into the essence of Akira Rainford, her small form silhouetted against the vast, flowing network of his internal mana nerves. With a determined cry, she vows to uncover every hidden corner of his being, searching for the source of his untapped potential. Suddenly, a brilliant, multi-hued radiance erupts before her, catching her completely off guard. She stares in disbelief at the shimmering, rainbow-colored glow that begins to fill the void, pulsing with an intensity she never expected to find. Reaching the very terminus of the connected pathways, the young mage realizes the implications of what she has found. The path doesn't simply end. It leads to a revelation that changes everything she thought she knew about his condition. Deep within the supposedly severed nerves, she stumbles upon a hidden reservoir of energy. It isn't that he lacked a mana pool, but rather that it was buried where no one thought to look, and its sheer presence leaves her breathless with shock as she questions the nature of this discovery. The discovery culminates in a breathtaking display of power as a bottomless well of rainbow mana surges forth. She is humbled by the realization that this vast, swirling vortex of energy far exceeds the limits of her own considerable magical capacity, marking a turning point in their journey. Elsewhere, or perhaps within the depths of a memory, a massive, shadowed figure looms, its voice echoing with a desperate plea. The entity cries out, insisting that his presence is vital to their cause, its silhouette flickering against a dark, uncertain background. Beside the towering silhouette, a smaller, armored figure stands in the gloom, their forms barely discernible against the dark horizon. The weight of an unspoken history and a shared destiny hangs heavy between them as they wait for a response. Pearl Bryce, a prodigy from Pennsylvania, reflects on the nature of mana. In the world's strongest magic nation, she was considered a monster because her mana pool was equivalent to a dozen average mages, a fact that often led to whispers behind her back. However, as she observes Akira Rainford, her previous standards are shattered. His mana is not just large, it is on an entirely different level, a vast and overwhelming force that leaves her questioning if it's the result of consuming too much elixir. She continues to reel from the discovery, wondering how such an unimaginable amount of mana, a rainbow-colored glow never recorded in any grimoire, could have been hidden for so long within his soul. Upon closer inspection, she makes a chilling discovery. The nerves around his mana pool have been severed with surgical precision. It was no accident. Someone deliberately sought to suppress his true power using a technique that seems almost inhuman. The moment of revelation is cut short as a sudden threat emerges, forcing her to scream a warning for a shift to physical defense as the environment around them begins to fracture. A massive, fiery beast lunges forward, its presence suffocating. Akira realizes too late that he miscalculated. failing to account for the creature's devastating breath attack as the ground erupts in chaos and fire. He stares up at the towering monstrosity, the reality of his situation sinking in. The thought of his second life coming to such a violent, abrupt end flashes through his mind as the beast prepares to strike again. Desperate to protect his companion, he shouts for her to get away, even as the sheer pressure of the encounter begins to overwhelm his senses and his timing falters. The beast unleashes a cataclysmic strike, a pillar of destructive energy aimed directly at the small figure. He can only watch in horror, praying that she survives the impact of an attack that no one should be able to endure. She lunges forward, her blade glowing with intense energy as she executes the Longinus oratorica, a specialized strike from the swingin' second style. Recalling that the salamander's weakness lies behind the flame sac on its chest, she commits everything to this single, decisive blow. Because of her strike, the beast lets out a deafening roar of agony as its chest cavity ruptures. She watches with bated breath, questioning if her gamble paid off, just as a torrent of molten, lava-like fluid begins to spray violently from the creature's wound. As the searing liquid erupts around her, she finds herself trapped in the center of a chaotic explosion of heat and light. She stares in horror, realizing too late that the contents of the torn flame sac are as viscous and inescapable as lava, leaving her no path for retreat. Meanwhile, far from the heat of battle, the majestic spires of the capital stand silent, a stark contrast to the desperate cry for Metasphina that echoes through the mind of the fallen warrior. Moments later, the dust begins to settle, revealing her limp form being hoisted onto the back of the young traveler. He trudges through the smoldering ruins of the battlefield, her weight heavy against his shoulders as he navigates the thick haze of smoke. She stirs, her voice weak but laced with venom as she demands to know where they are going, accusing him of being a coward for abandoning their companion. He can't help but remark that despite her severe burns and depleted mana, her sharp tongue remains fully functional. Because she continues to struggle and protest, he maintains his grip, ignoring her insults about his character while trying to explain that this retreat is part of a larger strategy. He pleads with her to listen, explaining the existence of a scroll of an elixir that can fully restore their companion's mana. He argues that this is not a joke and that once the mana is restored, it can be transferred to her to turn the tide of the battle. She scoffs at the absurdity of the proposal, her voice dripping with disbelief as she questions the logic of granting mana to someone with such poor efficiency. Even if the legendary scroll were real, the idea of using it to summon a mere golem seems like a fool's errand to her. He remains undeterred by her skepticism, his expression hardening with a resolve that defies the tactical disadvantage of their current situation. Despite the elemental mismatch, he stands his ground, prepared to push forward with his desperate gamble. With a fierce cry that echoes through the chaos, he declares his true intent. He isn't summoning a common construct, but the Leviathan itself, the legendary divine beast of water. Far from the heat of battle, the spires of the royal capital stand tall, though the weight of a broken promise hangs heavy over the city. Metasphina reflects on the burden she has placed upon him, acknowledging the immense inconvenience and danger her choices have caused. She stands in quiet contemplation, her regal bearing momentarily softened by a look of profound longing and sorrow. Her thoughts turn into a silent plea, a desperate hope that he understands the gravity of the situation. The entire nation's survival now rests solely on his shoulders. From the depths of the shadows, a colossal, craggy figure looms, its voice joining the chorus of those who depend on his strength. Beside the giant, the ancient knight remains a silent, stoic sentinel, a remnant of a forgotten era watching the unfolding destiny. Katia is in a dire state, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she leans against a rocky surface, her body battered and bloodied. Despite the overwhelming power of the magic barrier and the relentless assault of the bloody finds, she refuses to yield. She knows she must stand her ground. Faltering now is not an option. Her gaze hardens with a desperate resolve, every fiber of her being focused on a single goal, buying enough time for Akira and Prole to escape the encroaching danger. Suddenly, the ground erupts in a violent explosion of dust and debris. Amidst the chaos, Akira grabs hold of Katia, pulling her back from the brink. She struggles against his grip, shouting for him to let her go, but he remains firm. He turns his attention to Prole, his voice sharp with urgency as he questions if they are truly prepared to let Katia perish. He stares intensely at the young girl, warning her that any reckless attempt to intervene will only lead to both of their deaths. With a swift motion, he unfurls a mystical scroll. A brilliant, blinding light surges from the parchment, enveloping Prole in a restorative aura. She gasps in disbelief as the radiance fades, finding her wounds vanished and her magical reserves completely replenished in an instant. Stunned, she questions how such a feat was possible, wondering if he truly just cast a high-level elixir from a mere scroll. Relieved that the gamble paid off, he admits his own worry, noting that the scroll itself was nearly destroyed by the heat and was one of the few items he managed to save. He then makes a bold request, asking her to share her newly restored magic with him. She is left speechless, never having even heard of an elixir scroll, and questions what he intends to do with her power. Standing tall with his back to her, he reiterates his singular focus, saving Katia. He declares his intention to summon the divine beast Leviathan, a feat she considers impossible for a mere human. She questions his sanity, wondering if he truly understands the weight of making a contract with such a powerful entity. He turns back to her, his expression grim and unwavering. He challenges her to provide the magic he needs to prove his words, reminding her that she has the power to stop him at any moment if his plan proves to be a lie. He stands amidst the chaos, his mind racing with the impossibility of the task. Pearl hesitates, her thoughts a whirlwind of doubt. A contract between a human and a divine beast is unheard of, a gamble with Kadia's very life. Yet, the urgency of their situation leaves no room for fear. He reminds himself of the miracle he already performed, the elixir that shouldn't have been possible, and steels his resolve for what comes next. Because of this shared desperation, she finally relents, initiating a massive transfer of her latent magical energy. The sheer scale of her power catches him off guard, surpassing anything he has ever felt before. As the mana flows into him, she issues a stern warning, her voice trembling with the weight of her trust, while he realizes that with this immense reservoir, the impossible might just be within reach. Moments later, the ritual reaches its crescendo as the drawing is completed, and the air itself seems to fracture. From the swirling vortex of mana, Leviathan, the divine beast of water, erupts into existence, its colossal, draconic form radiating an ancient and terrifying majesty that dwarfs everything in its presence. The sight of the legendary creature leaves the companions paralyzed with awe and disbelief. They struggle to reconcile the myth with the reality looming before them, questioning if such a feat could truly be achieved by a human. Even he, the one who called it forth, stares up in a daze, the weight of the elixir's success and the beast's presence blurring the lines of what he thought possible. As the beast's shadow falls over them, the sheer pressure of its existence becomes suffocating. Kadia and Prol can only watch in stunned silence as the massive entity coils in the air, its eyes fixed upon the young man who dared to summon it. He stands his ground, though the magnitude of the power he now commands is almost more than his body can bear. Suddenly, the beast draws in a deep, rattling breath, preparing to unleash its primal fury. The air grows heavy with moisture as it readies an aqua breath attack, a display of power so immense that it leaves Prol gasping. She realizes that the creature's strength is far beyond anything they had anticipated, a force of nature that defies logic. The resulting blast is overwhelming, forcing them to scramble for safety as the environment is reshaped by the beast's power. He realizes with a grim, sinking feeling that this is indeed the strongest of the divine beasts, a creature whose might could challenge the gods themselves. With no other options, he prepares to push his luck to the absolute limit, knowing that one wrong move will be their end. Watching him from the periphery, she is struck by the sheer volume of magic he is attempting to channel. A new realization dawns on her as she observes the brat she once doubted. If he can truly harness and control that vast, swirling ocean of energy, he might become something the world has never seen before. The massive form of the Leviathan looms, its presence acting as a shield against the surrounding chaos. Kadia rushes toward Prol, her voice trembling with relief as she confirms the child is unharmed. She looks up at the divine beast, still struggling to process the sheer scale of the power that saved them. She stares in disbelief, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. The summoner they had hired didn't just call forth a familiar, he had manifested a divine beast. From a distance, Akira stands before the towering creature, his silhouette small but resolute against its immense power. Later, she recounts the events with fervent intensity, her eyes wide as she insists to her master that the boy's abilities are nothing short of miraculous. She speaks with a conviction that borders on awe, desperate to convey the truth of what she witnessed during the heat of battle. Metasphina listens, her expression one of deep skepticism as she counters that performing such an advanced summon at the age of 7 is fundamentally impossible. Even a fire attribute golem would be a creative stretch, making the story of a divine beast seem like a total fabrication to her ears. Undeterred, the young woman presses on, detailing how she saw him not only change the summon's attribute, but also materialize physical items directly from scrolls. She emphasizes that these weren't mere illusions. She saw the impossible happen with her own eyes, and the evidence was undeniable. A joyful, almost giddy smile breaks across her face as she admits to breaking her promise of secrecy. She justifies her betrayal of confidence by pointing to the current crisis, believing that his overwhelming power is the only thing that can truly save them now. Her mind fills with the image of the young hero, convinced that his potential extends far beyond just saving Stormheim from the odor. In her eyes, he is destined to be a savior for the entire world, a beacon of hope in their darkest hour. The harsh reality of their situation soon pulls her back, as Metasphina notes how uncharacteristically giddy her normally prudent student has become. They are still in a dire state. Prol is weakened, and Metasphina's own magic is nearly depleted, forcing them to rely on the Leviathan's massive form for cover as they attempt to retreat. She watches in stunned silence as Kadia urgently explains the dire situation. If the Leviathan vanishes, the Salamander's wrath will turn toward them. Kadia's voice cuts through the chaos, commanding Prol to take over the task of supplying Akira with magic, a desperate gamble to find any advantage they can. The small companion is taken aback by the sudden request, but Kadia's plea is desperate and sincere. Recognizing the gravity of the moment, Prol agrees to help, noting that it is rare for her friend to ask so politely. While Kadia insists she has a plan that requires every bit of magic they can muster. She initiates a magic transfer without a moment's delay, channeling her own essence into Prol to provide the necessary fuel. Prol accepts the influx of power, acknowledging the sacrifice and bracing for the grueling task ahead. knowing that the most difficult part of the process is about to begin. The objective is clear but perilous. Reconnect the isolated magic nerves to the central source with surgical precision. A minimum of 30% restoration is required for success, but the margin for error is non-existent. A single mistake could permanently strip the boy of his abilities or, in the worst-case scenario, end his life. They pour every ounce of knowledge and skill into the effort, focusing intently as the magic begins to coalesce. Slowly, the numbers begin to climb, ticking upward from 8% to 28% as the fractured source starts to mend under the intense pressure of the restoration. With a final, desperate surge of concentration, the threshold is finally reached. The magic source flares to life as the counter hits 30%, signaling that the connection has been successfully re-established against all odds. In the midst of the magical surge, a fleeting memory of a woman hanging laundry in the sunlight flickers through the mind. A voice calls out his name, a tether to a simpler time that seems worlds away from the current struggle. He gasps as the sensation of power returns, radiating from deep within his very soul. It is a strange, overwhelming feeling, as if the void that had been carved into him has been filled, making it seem as though the magic had never truly been lost at all. The young man stands transformed, his body wreathed in an aura of such intensity that it seems to boil over into the air around him. Those watching can only stare in awe at the sheer volume of energy, which flows like a revitalized spring, far exceeding what anyone had anticipated from a mere 30% restoration. She can hardly believe the scale of the power on display, questioning how such a massive reservoir of magic could have remained hidden for so long. Katia, however, wastes no time on wonder, telling the boy that they are putting his restored strength to work immediately to turn the tide of the battle.